From the moment he was in his mother's womb, this young man regained all the memories of his past life, and the result was a baby's body simply couldn't handle such a massive amount of knowledge, nearly causing him to kick the bucket for a second time when suddenly a system notification appeared before his eyes. Achievement unlocked: conquering adversity. You have obtained the Overcomer trait. The moment you lose the ability to fight, all skills will be boosted to rank A. You will also become immune to pain while the skill is active. What on earth? Sunho couldn't believe his eyes. How the heck did he stumble upon such a trait? A trait that made the very first villain the strongest of them all, a terrifying ability that could easily turn the tides even if he lost consciousness. From now on, Sunho's second life officially begins. From the moment he was born, he was given the mission, grow up fast and healthy. He didn't need to do anything but grow up in the arms of his parents. Before long, the first grow up fast and healthy mission was completed, and he moved to stage 2. Sunho received a massive stat boost. By now, he finally understood why the first villain had become so powerful. In the apocalyptic world, the 8 great villains and the 8 great saints together formed a group of 16 of the strongest S-rank awakeners. The 8 great saints were those loyal to the system. The other 8 turned their backs on the system and were called the 8 great villains. But no matter what they were called, the goal of these scumbags was simply to satisfy their own twisted desires, nothing more, nothing less. Sunho and his comrades stood up against them, those who relied on their immense power to hog all the items and dungeons for themselves. But the end result was like throwing an egg against a rock. The strongest among them, the first villain, while others were still struggling. With the power they had just awakened, he had already reached a state of perfection. But what he didn't expect was the birth of someone on his level. It was all thanks to his own big mouth boasting about himself since he was a fetus. Talk about digging your own grave. After spending a year in an infant's body, Sunho finally managed to call up his status window. At this age, he was guaranteed to receive a reward from the system. An unexpected notification popped up. Congratulations, you have become the first awakener. Sunho was absolutely stunned. It was even better than he had expected. The reward for the first awakened person was a challenge chest. A chest suddenly appeared within Sunho's consciousness, glowing brilliantly. Sunho couldn't help but be amazed. This was the highest grade chest, the very one that helped him travel back in time. He couldn't believe he was opening it once again. The reward inside this chest was the skill Odin's Wrath. This skill allowed Sunho to control lightning in the palm of his hand. As the name suggests, this is a mythical grade skill, and the signature technique of one of the 8 great villains. Sunho still remembered clearly the day more than half his guild was wiped out by a mere flick of his fingers. With this in his hands, Sunho finally had a chance to turn the tables on those people. But he still needed to prepare thoroughly before the day of Genesis. Meanwhile, in reality, Sunho couldn't stop crying because his body couldn't handle the mental strain. Seeing this, his mother gently held him in her arms. "My precious son, my only wish is to see you grow up healthy and happy." After a while, Sunho recovered. His spirits. He looked at his parents, his heart filled with determination. The reason he came back to the past was to protect everyone. He vowed he would not let anyone do otherwise, even if it cost him everything. In his previous life, Sunho was just walking down the street when the day of Genesis happened. His normal life vanished in the blink of an eye. The whole world fell into an apocalypse. Strange monsters appeared, crazily tearing people apart. Sunho watched this scene frozen in place. Just then, the country broadcast a nationwide announcement. "Attention citizens, this is not a drill. Unknown monsters are attacking the populace. Monsters are currently rampaging outside. Citizens, please evacuate into buildings immediately." Sunho finally snapped out of it and ran for his life, but suddenly a notification appeared before his eyes. Trial area. Sunho's entire body turned into a beam of light and vanished. It wasn't just him. Many others faced the same situation. After the day of Genesis occurred, those first few days, monsters poured out from portals that had ripped through space. Those chosen to awaken were pushed into trial areas. Some spent months there, while others spent decades. The awakeners who returned didn't even have time to catch their breath because they had to fight against terrifyingly powerful monsters. After being pushed to the brink of extinction, humanity used its strongest weapons, nuclear weapons. But in the end, humanity failed and nations collapsed. The 8 great villains and the 8 great saints used their own power to build their forces. But all of that was still a long way off. The world was currently still peaceful. Everyone's life was still continuing. Sunho, for now, is still just a little brat in diapers. He lay there watching TV, judging the idiotic actions of the countries at the time, noticing their son acting strangely. His parents of Sunho came closer to play with him. At this moment, Sunho realized that this was a different life. As long as he prepared everything carefully, he could change that dark future. That night, while his parents were sound asleep, Sunho sneaked awake. He used all the strength in his tiny body to try and walk, but he only managed 1 step before falling face first and falling asleep right there. After all, this was still just a baby's body. But in the end, Sunho's willpower prevailed. He fought against the sleepiness and took 10 full steps. It was all to complete the system's quest chain. A notification appeared. You have completed the quest chain. Become healthy. Your vitality has increased by 1. You have received 20 points. Congratulations. You have met the conditions for power growth. You have received the quest reward bronze chest. Sunho looked at the chest in front of him, amazed. This is insane. Is this really the bronze chest I had to suffer through that dungeon to get? The reward I received for my progress is, honestly, unbelievable. This makes me even more certain. I will take that first villain out, and I'll do it before that fateful day even begins. If he has been born and is growing up, with this level of potential, he will become another catastrophe for all of humanity. Time flew by and autumn arrived. Sunho lay there, sunbathing blankly, staring at the system screen. The next quest is pretty simple. Choose a target and talk to them for 10 sentences or more. But who should Sunho talk to? If a baby just a few months old started talking, it would be like something out of a horror movie. This quest is a real headache. Just then, Sunho noticed the calendar on the wall. The Mid-Autumn Festival is coming up. He'll have the chance to complete this quest then. The target that Sunho is aiming for is his cousin JJ. She's only 4, but she can already speak well. She is the perfect target for this mission. In his past life, JJ passed the bar exam and was incredibly beautiful. She was the cousin Sunho was so proud of, but on that fateful day, she and her mother went missing. In this new life, can Sunho change that outcome? As soon as she saw Sunho, JJ couldn't resist his cuteness and gave him a warm hug. Just then, Sunho spoke up, giving JJ quite a start. From afar, who would ever suspect that 2 children were actually having a conversation? Sunho then didn't forget to tell JJ to keep it a secret for him. Even though she was surprised, JJ agreed to help her little cousin. Just then, a notification popped up. You have completed the life progression quest chain. Congratulations, you have completed all the introductory missions. Who would have thought that everything Sunho had gone through so far was just the tutorial? A notification continued to appear. You have received the option to skip the remaining tutorial. There will be no pre-planned missions after this. Will you skip the childhood tutorial? Even though Sunho wanted to spend more time with his family, there would be moments where he might surprise or terrify everyone. After careful consideration, Sunho decided to skip the tutorial. In the blink of an eye, Sunho's consciousness was transported to his middle school years. The time was now 1997. Sunho is now 12 years old. After skipping the tutorial, he became a tall, well-built youth. He participated in countless fights against local thugs to improve his combat skills. Even if an opponent was big and wielded a weapon, Sunho could easily dodge them and knock his opponent out instantly. He became a famous fighter known by many and swept through the Mapo district. After Sunho won, the broker approached him, draping an arm around his shoulder, flattering him. I know it might be a bit late to say this, but you shouldn't waste your talent in places like this. You have the absolute potential to become a world-class fighter. Why do you have to get involved in these street brawls and end up getting hurt? But Sunho didn't care about that at all. He looked the broker straight in the eye with a cold, intense gaze. I hate repeating myself. If you can't find anyone, I'll have someone else find them. Then Sunho walked away coldly. On the way, he checked his status window. Sunho's body now resembled that of an adult. His strength and agility had far surpassed those of professional athletes. Sunho took off his hat, revealing his handsome face. Looking like this, who would ever think he was just a kid? 12 years old, no less. After that, He checked the wounds from his recent fight. Being an awakened helped Sun-ho recover faster. The wounds had completely healed. Back when he was in school, his height was only average, but now he stands at 1.8 meters tall. Surely the stats he gained during the tutorial period had an effect during the time. That was fast-forwarded. Sun-ho's physique developed far more significantly than that of a typical 12-year-old. But since he still failed the inspection and there were no more missions, he had to go conquer a dungeon to level up. Sun-ho thought of a location on a mountain in Gyeonggi Province in the city of Hwaseong. There was an F-rank dungeon being sealed off. Sun-ho sat in the classroom, but his mind was only on conquering that dungeon. Before heading out to conquer it, I have to prepare many things. I must buy that mountain and isolate it from the outside world. I also need to build defensive layers in case monsters leak out of the dungeon. This mountain costs $1.3 million. If you include the cost of defensive infrastructure, the price is truly astronomical. Not only that, there are many hidden dungeons in this world. If I want to seize all of them, Sun-ho must take the upper hand first. He knows the future, so money isn't an issue. He could possess a massive fortune in a heartbeat. But since Sun-ho is still a minor, he can't borrow too much money. He will need an agent. While he was deep in thought, Sun-ho was flicked on the head by the teacher, but he has no head for middle school studies right now. Sun-ho continued to think about what he needed to do. The only person he could entrust this to was a comrade from his past life. Sun-ho recalled the unforgettable memories with that comrade. Back then, Sun-ho had been betrayed by two men he considered brothers. They both drove sharp spears into him, muttering, "Don't blame us, Captain. If you were us, you would have done the same thing." But it's not that Sun-ho hadn't thought about this situation. Sun-ho calmly placed his hands on the two spears, and suddenly a burst of red light exploded, wiping out the two traitors and everything around him. Once he escaped the danger, he couldn't help but curse. Those bastards went completely insane the moment they saw the box, didn't they? But before he could even catch his breath, a familiar voice echoed beside him. Is that the imprint of destruction? Good thing I didn't wander too close. It was his close brother-in-arms, Jonathan. Sun-ho was extremely tense, thinking he was done for, but it turned out Jonathan had come to save him. Jonathan reached out his hand and used the imprint. He healed him. The two spears stuck in Sun-ho's body were removed, and all his wounds were mended. Only then did Sun-ho dare to breathe a sigh of relief. Jonathan, in a world that has turned its back on God, you still have some humanity left, huh? After resting, they both left the dungeon. On the way, Jonathan started a conversation. So, you work on Wall Street, too. Do you remember the financial market in 1997? Sun-ho immediately remembered the terrible memories of that year. My country was sinking in a financial crisis. I was still young then, but I remember it clearly. Jonathan only then realized that Sun-ho was Korean. He just laughed it off, saying, "Don't let this disheveled look fool you." But Jonathan was a famous trader back in the day in Hong Kong. During the Asian financial crisis, a trader was an individual who bought and sold financial assets by analyzing financial data. Beside the burning fire, Jonathan proudly boasted about his past achievements. I was much more of a beast back then than I am now. People used to call me the old wolf of Wall Street. What's an A-rank awakened compared to that? I liked those days better when money was everything, don't you think so? Sun-ho stared intently at Jonathan. He didn't quite understand this man. He had already achieved an A-rank status that made everyone green with envy, yet he was still here, reminiscing about his glorious past. Back in the present, Jonathan was now 25 and working on Wall Street. Throughout his stories, he kept mentioning the nickname Wolf of Wall Street because the financial firm he worked at back then had the word wolf in its name. Thanks to those details, Sun-ho managed to find Jonathan's information online. Afterward, Sun-ho sent an email with an intriguing subject. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'd like to hear your opinion on whether the Thai bot is currently overvalued." Sun-ho hit send with great confidence. He was certain Jonathan would reply to this email. At that time, Jonathan had already started to suspect whether hedge funds were planning to attack the Thai bot, but he wasn't sure yet. If he dared to make a big move based on the information provided, the history books written about him would no longer be just tall tales he had invented himself. For those who don't know, a hedge fund is an investment fund that uses the massive assets of others to maximize profit, and because they care so much about profit, they are sometimes called the devils of capitalism. Just as Sun-ho thought, Jonathan immediately replied to his email, "The bot is not overvalued. Sun-ho knew at a glance that Jonathan was just trying to play dumb. He continued to send more emails to pique the other's curiosity. Apologies about the bot being overvalued. What I really meant was no one can raise the price, right? The moment Jonathan read this, he hurriedly asked, "Can you tell me your identity and the organization you work for?" Seeing the other party fall into his trap, Sun-ho began providing more information. There are many reasons for its value to rise given the state of foreign exchange reserves in Asia and the projected rising value of the US dollar. It's quite easy to understand if a hedge fund makes this decision. I believe that this month there will be an attack on the value of the baht. If this war truly breaks out, Thailand won't be the final target. Thailand is just a stepping stone. Jonathan, after reading these analyses, was extremely shocked. Countless thoughts raced through his head. Thailand is just a stepping stone, unbelievable. It's true that the situation on Wall Street is a mess. That person used the term leverage, proving he's an insider. Who is he, or rather, who are they? This could be a challenge. After thinking for a long time, Jonathan decided to reply, "My office is always open. I'm ready to welcome you at any time. If you can't visit my office, here is my contact information." Sun-ho, sitting in front of the computer screen, wore a smug smile. "Oh, Jonathan, I knew you would react this way. Your judgment is excellent, just a bit indecisive, but you can't ignore this. Very soon, a war will break out in the financial market." April 1997. The hedge fund's attack on the baht officially began. Back in 1992, it took about 50 days for a hedge fund to destroy the British pound. Based on this, Wall Street felt that Thailand collapsing in 50 days was normal. But the Thai baht wasn't that easy to defeat. They resisted fiercely and even dared to deal a heavy blow to the hedge fund. In the end, after 3 months, Thailand collapsed on July 2nd. Those were the future details Sun-ho knew. He would make good use of this information to earn a huge sum of money, but the most important thing right now was to improve his physical fitness. Sun-ho was still in the process of training day and night to prepare for what was coming. Sometime later, after everything happened exactly as Sun-ho said, Jonathan started to panic. He had sent Sun-ho over 10 emails. The topics were all about the profits from betting on the collapse of the baht in May, but everyone could have guessed that. Sun-ho sent Jonathan an email with the subject, "Disappointed. If you received profits from betting on the growth of the baht, then contact me again." Sun-ho smiled confidently, and then sent another email. "If you are confident and create your own investment firm, I intend to give you an investment proposal to compensate. I want about 51% of the investment firm." Jonathan's face changed color after reading the email. He couldn't believe what he was reading. What is this? My God, he wants to bet that the baht will grow. I want 51% of the investment company. Jonathan's face paled after reading the email. He couldn't believe his eyes. What is this? Good grief, does he want to bet that the dollar will grow? But if you think about it carefully, he's the one who said the baht would be attacked. He never actually said whether the hedge funds would win or lose. If that's the case, once the attack is launched, Thailand won't be able to hold out. Even with his superior financial system, he won't be able to stop it. Endless calculations were running through Jonathan's head. He meticulously cross-referenced the documents, but all the information pointed to the fact that the baht would struggle to grow any further. An offer of 51% for an investment proposal was a total joke. After some serious thought, Jonathan decided he'd been played, so he picked up the phone to contact other VIPs, but Jonathan suddenly hesitated. He had an intense gut-wrenching feeling that everything Sun-ho said was true. Jonathan immediately hung up the phone and emailed Sun-ho. "Why did you conclude that the hedge funds would lose?" He comfortably sipped his coffee, telling himself this would be the final question, but he didn't expect to get a reply right away. "It seems you've misunderstood me. I didn't say the hedge funds would lose. I only said that Thailand's banks have quite a few ways to protect themselves during this month of May. Bilateral agreements, dual exchange rate systems, and the like. There are several cards that Thailand hasn't even used yet. My conclusion is that the baht will grow for a short time." Jonathan finished reading the email and choked on his water right there. He realized that these things were entirely possible. Right now, Wall Street is predicting that the baht will collapse in May. Because they are so confident, they've taken this opportunity to cultivate relationships with VIPs. If the baht doesn't actually collapse in May, Wall Street will fall instead. Jonathan clutched his head in frustration. He was torn about what choice to make. In the end, he chose to trust Sun-ho and went to tell his boss. But all Jonathan got in return was a torrent of verbal abuse. "Jonathan, have you lost your mind? The bot is going to grow. Those greedy hedge funds have poured everything they have into destroying the bot, and you think Thailand can defend itself. If you keep spewing such nonsense, pack your things and get out. I'm afraid the rumor that I keep an idiot like you on the payroll will spread far and wide." Jonathan gritted his teeth and picked up the documents one by one from the floor. All around him, his colleagues were gossiping loudly. Jonathan had already foreseen that this outcome would happen, but for some reason he couldn't explain, he felt compelled to believe that information. Afterward, Jonathan replied to Sun-ho, "Betting that the bot will grow won't bring any profit. Unfortunately, our Guff Group has no intention of pursuing that kind of gain." Jonathan looked haggard now. He hadn't slept in days, his mind constantly racing about the Thai bot. Sun-ho took this opportunity to advise Jonathan to strike out on his own. But if Jonathan handed over 51%, it would be no different than giving his money and his future to the other party. Who would ever agree to a deal like that? But Sun-ho didn't intend to back down. He persisted with his offer. "Think about it very carefully. My offer only stands until the end of May." Seeing this, Jonathan wanted to meet the person in person at his office, but he received no response at all. Jonathan was furious and kicked the trash can next to him. Now the voices of those around him just kept echoing in his head. "Jonathan, are you really going to go through with this? You're the only one not investing in the collapse of the bot. What the hell are you doing? How can you be so oblivious to what's staring you in the face? His mind must not be right anymore. Jonathan, people at the office are looking down on you. If you keep this up, I'm pulling my support." Jonathan just sat in his chair, clutching his head. He was doubting his own decisions. Was he doing the right thing? Not long after Jonathan had the answer for himself. The ASEAN Central Bank used a $12 trillion bilateral agreement to support Thailand. Wall Street felt like it was going to explode. No one believed what was happening. Even Jonathan was stunned, speechless right there. Just then, a female colleague rushed over, panicked. "Jonathan, you were right. The bot is growing. Everyone is panicking to the point of madness. They've lost at least $300 million. When Jonathan heard that he couldn't hold back his tears and buried his face in his hands. His decision had been absolutely correct. It was a good thing he chose to trust Sun-ho. Just then, a colleague came to tell him that his boss wanted to see him. Jonathan straightened his clothes and walked into the meeting room. His boss was now introducing him as the Pride, and of the Guff Group to the VIPs. Contrary to his previous words, Jonathan understood the reason for this immediately. The VIPs were extremely angry about the bot's growth. The boss wanted to introduce Jonathan to shift the danger away from himself, but life isn't a dream. Jonathan decisively placed his business card in front of the VIPs and said, "Starting today, I am leaving the Guff Group to establish a new investment firm. Since I won't change my position, please contact me anytime for valuations." Seeing this, the boss immediately tried to stop him, but Jonathan's mind was made up. He was going to leave this place where his word was not respected. Jonathan was extremely confident that he would soon receive a few offers, because after all, he was known to everyone on Wall Street as the only manager who avoided this disaster. Hearing that the VIPs decided to leave, the Guff Group no longer had anything worth keeping. Jonathan walked out of the conference room as his colleagues stared in shock. He happily packed his personal belongings before heading out. Jonathan emailed Sun-ho, "I quit. I accept your crazy proposal. Let's meet to discuss the details. Where do I need to go?" At that moment, Sun-ho was doing handstand push-ups at home. He never stopped pushing his physical limits. Upon receiving Jonathan's email, Sun-ho immediately jumped up. Finally, his plan to make money was finally underway. A satisfied smile spread across his face and he replied to Jonathan, "Get to Seoul, now." While waiting for Jonathan to arrive, Sun-ho continued his life as a middle school student. Middle school life didn't affect Sun-ho much, or rather he didn't. I have much affection for school. Since his body was more developed than his peers, Sun-ho was isolated and had no friends, but that was just fine. He was already too used to being alone. The quiet, empty hallway suddenly stirred memories he never wanted to revisit, scenes of a city piled high with corpses. Just then, the teacher stood watching Sun-ho's lonely silhouette, and for some reason suddenly burst into tears. Perhaps she felt the deep sorrow behind that back. The next day, Sun-ho went to pick up Jonathan at the airport. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the two found a quiet spot to talk. At this point, Jonathan still thought the young man in front of him was just a guide. Once they found a seat, Jonathan casually crossed his legs on the chair and said to Sun-ho, "So we just wait here. He's still enjoying his sweet moment while I'm dying to meet him, and his email writing skills are far from normal." When Sun-ho said he was the one who wrote the emails, Jonathan's face changed instantly. His mood shifted from surprise to anger. Jonathan couldn't believe he had been lured here by a kid. Furious, he slammed the table and shouted, "How old are you?" 1920. "I risked everything to come here. Do you even understand what you've done?" His eyes were full of resentment. It looked like he might jump up and grab Sun-ho by the throat at any moment, the exact same gaze as the Jonathan that Sun-ho knew. To calm Jonathan down, Sun-ho pulled a folder out of his bag. "Do you usually judge people on the street based on their age? Anyway, if you really don't like it, feel free to leave. But I should still give a gift to the distinguished guest who crossed the ocean to meet me." Jonathan immediately grabbed the folder. After glancing at the contents, he stood there frozen. Seeing this, Sun-ho spoke up. "Just sit down for a second, isn't it? The Asian financial crisis that was already predicted the moment the U.S. government gave them unlimited dollars. They said the 21st century would belong to Asia and the rise of the 4 Asian tigers. All the investment funds in the world have started meddling. So what do you think of what I gave you?" Jonathan, by now, could not take his eyes off the report in his hands. He asked Sun-ho back, "In any case, you really think Thailand is going to collapse?" Sun-ho didn't answer but asked back, "Before you read that report, what did you think?" But just like the current situation on Wall Street, Jonathan couldn't easily give an answer. After investment funds stopped pouring money into the Thai government, no one could guess the outcome of this battle, which was being called a currency war. This atmosphere persisted until July 2nd, when the Thai government announced its surrender. After finishing the report, Jonathan gave his answer, "So the attackers will win." But this report is missing a crucial part. Sun-ho folded his hands on the chair, his whole body radiating an aura so majestic it was suffocating. "I am not the one who needs to answer that question. Jonathan, you are the one who has to do that, whether you choose to work with me or not." Jonathan felt the threat in those words. If he didn't sign the contract, he wouldn't know anything. If he kept underestimating the teenager in front of him, he would be in big trouble. After thinking carefully, Jonathan negotiated comfortably. "With my wealth and my reports, I currently have everything. What do you have?" Sun-ho listened and said, "Isn't this an opportunity cost? What happens if I choose to cooperate with someone other than you? From the beginning of March until this very moment, as I am talking to you, I am wasting the money I could have been making." As an expert, Jonathan knew these words were completely accurate. He held his head and thought for a long time. It seemed he was still hesitating. Seeing this, Sun-ho stood up decisively to leave. "Fine then, I'll wait until June 3rd. As soon as he heard June 3rd, Jonathan seemed to have realized something. He hurriedly looked back at the report. From the projected growth chart, Jonathan realized that was exactly the day the Thai economy would plummet. He looked at Sun-ho with terrified eyes. "This here is June 2nd, right? Is that it? Hey, I know you can predict growth trends, but there's no way you could predict the details down to the exact day like this." Jonathan still couldn't believe his eyes at this point. It wasn't just an approximate time. Sun-ho had predicted the exact day and hour. This wasn't something a human could possibly do. While Jonathan was still stunned, Sun-ho turned to leave. "Until June 2nd, then, Jonathan. If by then you still haven't made a decision. If that's the case, then our relationship is officially over. If you're the Jonathan I once knew, you'll definitely make the right choice." That last sentence left Jonathan feeling a bit confused, but his eyes were exactly the same as they were back then. Jonathan would surely make the right choice. A few days later, Sun-ho received an email from Jonathan. As for what to name the company, Jonathan finally decided to sign the contract. After signing, Jonathan felt a twinge of regret, but it was already too late. The die was cast. His fate was now entirely in Sun-ho's hands. After becoming partners, Jonathan immediately asked Sun-ho how he had managed to predict this recession. He even knew the exact dates. But Sun-ho just brushed it off, saying it was all just a matter of calculations. Any fool would know that's a lie, but right now, it didn't matter anymore. Since they were now in the same boat, they could trust each other. Then Jonathan asked about their upcoming strategy. But Sun-ho only provided him with the information. Everything after that would be up to Jonathan to execute. It wasn't until now that Jonathan remembered to ask his partner's name. Good grief, money really does cloud a person's judgment. Jonathan wanted to name the hedge fund Jonathan and Son, but Sun Ho didn't want to draw any attention to himself, so he refused to use his own name. Then they started talking business. Currently, all the assets Jonathan had in the fund amounted to $400,000. After hearing that, Sun Ho looked at Jonathan with a blank stare. All he had was $400,000, yet he gave him 51% of it. Maybe he isn't quite right in the head, huh? Jonathan asked if Sun Ho had any capital to contribute. But where would a middle school kid get money to invest? That was exactly why he had demanded that Jonathan fly all the way to South Korea to meet him. Just then, Jonathan asked Sun Ho a question that had been bugging him for a long time. "Hey, son, why me? How did you even know about me?" When he found out he had been picked at random, Jonathan let out a long sigh. Sometimes opportunity knocks in the strangest of ways. When you beg for it, it never shows up at all. Hearing this, Sun Ho suddenly remembered the past. Jonathan had once said those exact same words down to every syllable. Initially, Jonathan had intended to save up points until he had enough to open a challenge chest. But halfway through, he decided to open a hegemon chest instead. This man who had decided to give up on everything wanted to sell the items from the hegemon chest to use the money to bury his life in worldly desires. Yet what he received was an incredibly powerful skill that you could only find in challenge chests. The ability for a low-level chest to contain a high-level item was almost like a miracle, and yet this miracle had come to a man who had decided to turn his back on everything. Ignoring Sun Ho's advice, Jonathan just started his revenge back in the present while Sun Ho was lost in thought. Jonathan pulled out a document that needed a signature. Jonathan asked if Sun Ho had his ID with him, but Sun Ho just handed him a piece of paper. Currently, that was the only way to verify Sun Ho's identity. The 13 numbers written there were his American Social Security number. Jonathan looked at the first 6 digits and his eyes widened in shock. According to those, Sun Ho was only 12 years old. Jonathan broke out in a cold sweat. He couldn't believe a kid could have such a mature body and mind. On top of that, he had just signed a contract with a 12-year-old. Was this a fatal mistake? Sun Ho just gave a faint smile. He had already anticipated this situation. He took out a stack of documents to discuss their upcoming plan. "Jonathan, there's no more time to be surprised about me. Now let us start discussing our business." Sun Ho pointed at the charts on the documents. "From the second week of June, from the 8th to the 13th, I am certain the market will drop by 10%. But Thailand won't collapse immediately. They will try to resist, and that is only the beginning. When the Thai market's recession hits, that 10% mark, fear, will engulf all of Asia. Relief capital for the bot will be quickly mobilized, and the final destination of that flow will be South Korea." Hearing this, Jonathan was incredibly shocked. "What are you talking about? Sun foreign capital can't just flow into South Korea without permission." Sun Ho immediately explained, "Exactly, because it will cause chaos in the Korean foreign exchange market. What is attacking Korea isn't money from relief funds, but something else strong enough to cover all of East Asia in fear. That fear will sweep away all the foreign capital currently pouring into Korea." Jonathan wondered, "Whoa, so a huge crisis is coming. Do you plan to do anything to stop it? Maybe out of patriotism? But even if you're a genius, a skilled sailor can't escape a tsunami." Of course, Sun Ho understood that. "So your primary goal will be money. The war will be ignited by those who hold hedge funds, but when the dust settles, we will see who is the one who profits the most from that battle. Jonathan, we're going to bet with 50 times leverage," Sun Ho said aggressively to Jonathan. The term economic leverage refers to borrowing debt to invest. With personal assets used as collateral, Jonathan was stunned by the plan. He said a 10% recession, but it wasn't the city. It just kept plummeting all the way down to negative 10%. It would climb 2%, drop 3%, and keep oscillating like that until at that exact moment it would be a free fall. That's why leverage is so. The higher the leverage, the greater the trading skill required. If your ratio is 50 times, losing just 1% means wiping out 50% of your capital. And 2% means losing the whole 100%. In other words, you're cleaned out. After returning home, Jonathan still couldn't believe what he was hearing. He emailed Sun Ho again. "Are you really planning to use $400,000 of my entire fortune with 50 times leverage? Is it because you trust me or because you don't care since it's not your money anyway?" Sun Ho was lifting weights while reading the email. He understood why Jonathan was so worried. 50 times leverage means trading assets worth $20 million with a capital of 400,000. Profits or losses are multiplied by 50. A high-risk investment, but Jonathan's trading ability wasn't half bad. By October, when the hedge funds were weakened after the shock in Hong Kong, as long as he trusted the data Sun Hu provided, victory was guaranteed. Sun Hu didn't say much, just wrote a short line, "I'm counting on you, Jonathan." This was probably the last chance to use 50 times leverage. Then the two of them had to strike hard and win big to be fully prepared for the battle. From the 9th to the 13th, about a week, the ball had been passed to him. Jonathan just had to take the shot. At this moment, at Jonathan's place, he was clutching his head on the verge of tears. But now that the arrow was shot, he had to see it through. Jonathan decided to risk it all, going all in. It was a go big or go home situation. A while later, Sun Hu went to the airport to pick up Jonathan. In Sun Hu's eyes, Jonathan looked like an A-rank awakener returning holding his spoils of war. You didn't see wrong? Jonathan had actually brought back a bounty even more precious than mana crystals from an S-rank monster. As soon as he met Sun Hu, Jonathan spoke up, 700 Sun. Sun Hu wasn't surprised at all and asked if Jonathan had converted all the money into US dollars. But Jonathan's attitude was a bit strange. He was about to lose his composure. You thought I said 700% no. I mean 700 times Sun. We turned $400,000 into 700 times that. A week has passed and we brought in $280 million. This was truly an astronomical figure, and their eyes suddenly lit up like hungry predators. This is just the beginning. They would shake the global economy. Afterward, they returned to the hotel together. Since he was still a teenager, Sun Hu had to pretend to stay at a friend's house. He had to ask his mom for permission to spend the night out. Such a young kid, and he already knew how to lie. Sun Hu carefully checked the pile of documents Jonathan brought back. The profit this time was 70,000% even better than what Sun Hu had expected. Jonathan was truly a capable investor. Jonathan, at this moment, couldn't contain his joy and drank beer to celebrate. He held the beer can in his hand and shouted, "Oh, love, my love, what the hell did we just do? I can't believe it at all." In just one single attempt, we've achieved explosive growth. A massive hedge fund created by the two of them. Seeing Jonathan so spirited, Sun Hu decided to discuss what needed to be done next. Sun Hu sat with his hands clasped on the chair, seriously providing information about the future. It looks like Thailand is going to implement a floating exchange rate system. We'll use that day as the starting point. We'll use our entire fund and leverage it to the max for one big bet. During the chaos that day, there won't be any upward trends. A vertical decline. No one will jump in to buy falling stocks. The situation seemed serious, and Jonathan had become serious as well. The implementation of the floating exchange rate system had already been announced as cancelled. Sun Hu then put forward his idea. "So what do you think about using $200 million? Jonathan's jaw dropped in shock. "You think those people in the hedge funds are just going to sit still if we bet $200 million and it loses value against the Thai baht?" Before Jonathan could finish his sentence, Sun Hu cut him off. "That's why we need to leave them a little bait. As I said before, they are the ones who will start the war. If we pick the wrong starting day, we'll lose everything." Jonathan, at this moment, couldn't keep his cool anymore. "At this rate, all the money we worked so hard to earn is at risk of being wiped out." He kept shouting that using such a huge fund without a risk assessment is truly insane. If you aren't a god, you can't do things like that. But Sun Hu had absolutely no intention of stopping. Jonathan saw the confident look in his eyes and understood that much. Sun Hu stepped forward to reassure Jonathan. "Starting tomorrow, there's some data we need to study. We need to check the percentage of Thailand's foreign exchange reserves that we've managed to snatch up with the $280 million we have now." Jonathan was a bit suspicious. This information wasn't something an ordinary person could easily obtain. Furthermore, calculating this is incredibly difficult. But Sun Hu doesn't calculate anything at all. He simply compares everything to the historical event recorded on July 2nd. As a precaution, you could lower the leverage ratio and change the date to July 1st. After careful consideration, Sun Hu turned back with a confident look. "Why would you think I called it a $200 million bet? $80 million is enough to get in touch with the head of the Bank of Thailand, isn't it?" Jonathan listened, somewhat disbelieving that the kid in front of him was only 12. At that age, this kind of knowledge is impossible to possess without decades of experience. After laying out the plan, Sun Hu told Jonathan he should take a trip to Thailand to get things done. At first, Jonathan was a bit worried, but he was soon persuaded by Sun Hu's confident demeanor. 1997 will be our golden year. Jonathan, give it your all. The next day, Jonathan seemed extremely anxious, but his eyes looked like an awakened player entering a dungeon. While Jonathan was searching for intel in enemy territory, Sun Hu was preparing to embark on a different path. He put on his familiar outfit and began some hand-to-hand combat. Against the thugs. This time, his opponent actually played dirty and used a knife, but in the end, Sun Hu broke his arm with just one strike. The thug fell to the ground in pain. He kept screaming that he would kill Sun Hu. If it weren't for the broker stopping him, Sun Hu would have sent the thug to meet his maker. The broker was so terrified because the guy lying on the ground was a notorious hothead, and there were even rumors that he was connected to the mob. He definitely wouldn't let this slide easily. But Sun Hu wasn't afraid. In fact, he was looking forward to the impending revenge. It would be a great opportunity to hone his skills. A moment later, Sun Hu was surrounded by a group of gangsters. Every single one of them was carrying a weapon, looking like they were ready to kill. The gangsters were quite surprised that Sun Hu didn't run away but chose to fight. Because it's very difficult to increase stats through regular training, Sun Hu decided to use this opportunity to test the results of his training. After their failed attempts at intimidation, the gangsters all rushed in at once. Despite their numbers, Sun Hu easily handled them one by one. None of them could take a single hit from him and remain unscathed. But it's hard for two hands to fight four. Sun Hu fell into a tough battle against the swarm of enemies. In a moment of carelessness, he was struck in the head by someone wielding a brick, and needless to say, that guy was finished. Sun Hu grabbed the guy by the collar and slammed him hard into the ground. Sun Hu was a bit dazed, blood streaming from the wound on his head, but now he could clearly see the openings in their fighting. It felt as if the system was urging him to use a skill. But if Sun Hu used Odin's wrath here, he would become a laughingstock. He decided to use only his raw physical prowess to take on the whole mob alone. While the whole lot of them were fighting like in a movie, one guy got bored and decided to end the match quickly. Without hesitation, he drove a motorcycle straight at Sun Hu. Sun Hu was sent flying by the impact, his back severely injured, unable to get up. The gangsters seized the opportunity to gang up on him. Unable to fight back, Sun Hu could only curl up and take the beating. Just at that moment, the guy whose arm was broken earlier ran over wanting to land the final blow, but he couldn't have expected Sun Hu to still have the strength to stand. The guy angrily rushed forward and kicked Sun Hu in the face. Sun Hu was kicked away and lost consciousness. Just then, his eyes glowed fiercely, radiating an intense killing intent. A system notification appeared, Overcomer activated. All of Sun Hu's stats and skills were upgraded from F to E. Sun Hu's body hovered in midair, emitting a mysterious red light. The thugs witnessed this scene and were terrified. Frenzied, they swung their knives wildly, but Sun Hu's speed was now far beyond what it was before. He threw a punch in the blink of an eye, turning the thug's face into that of a pig. Seeing this, the gang was paralyzed with fear. Sun Hu did not act rashly, but carefully assessed the situation. The sudden boost in stats made it hard for him to adjust to his body. Thanks to the effect of Overcomer, his wounds were partially healed. The sensation of pain was also temporarily suppressed. Right now, Sun Hu was a fighting machine in the literal sense. After looking at their boss's expression, the gangsters all rushed in at once, but for every two guys, one was knocked out on the spot. The only one left was the boss who had driven the motorcycle into Sun Hu. Sun Hu used the Odin's Wrath skill, launching lightning bolts at the vehicle. The boss was electrocuted, spun in the air a few times, and was thrown far away. After resolving everything, Sun Hu coldly walked away while the crowd watched in horror. After returning home, Sun Hu still persevered in physical training. Through today's battle, he had learned a few lessons. The Overcomer trait is not activated in self-harm mode. It only activates through external attacks, and when Sun Hu loses the ability to fight. Sun Hu had to get used to it, turning it into a powerful punch. This is the weapon for him to fight against monsters and the 8 evils and 8 saints after the Genesis Day. Right then, the phone rang. There was a call from abroad. As soon as he connected, Sun Hu spoke, "Good thing you contacted me first. Martial law." Jonathan was surprised. He didn't expect that even this could be predicted by Sun Hu. Not like a typical middle school kid at all. Skipping the pleasantries, Jonathan got straight to the point. Whatever you say, you were right. They really acted as if they were waiting for us. I was almost shot. According to my research, our profits have already exceeded 20%. Close call indeed. With just a few words, Sunho had already guessed the situation on Jonathan's end. He didn't even mention the situation in Thailand. By saying close call, he meant that Thailand still possessed more foreign currency than he had expected, so he still wasn't sure if the hedge funds had truly won the battle or not. Sunho understood this hesitation and asked, "We already agreed to bet everything, didn't we? Jonathan, do you have any objections?" Jonathan heard this and said, "I've already fully agreed to spend all $80 million just to read that pile of documents. Not even counting the results, the things we're doing right now are already insane." "So when is the deadline?" Sunho smiled confidently. "On July 2nd, we'll place our bets at the highest level." Jonathan was trembling uncontrollably, unable to stay calm. "I'm starting to lose it." "If your calculations are right, you understand it clearly, don't you? How the hedge funds, the Divine Dragon, and those other guys will react." Of course, Sunho knew this. After all, those guys were the ones leading the pack. When representatives of the hedge funds like the Divine Dragon started moving, the others would follow suit. Their relationship was similar to the one between the 8 great villains and the 8 great sages with the world's hunters. When someone starts fighting on the front lines, the supporters behind them will create a disaster. Jonathan held his face and groaned. "If you're right, we're going to affect every investment fund in the world with a single incident. Oh my God, my weak heart is about to explode." After that, the two chatted happily, and all their worries gradually faded away. Without realizing it, they had become reliable comrades to each other without even knowing when it started. July 1st, Hong Kong officially returned to being a territory of China. Some said history would repeat itself. A more modern version of the Opium War would happen in Asia. Western investment funds poured in dollars instead of opium to weaken their economic systems and attacked them by dumping those nations' money, instead of cannons on ships. The reason why the human war happened in Asia before Sunho's regression was because there was an S-rank dungeon sealed there led by a person among the 8 great sages and that person's subordinates. However, the winner of the war back then was someone else. But those things haven't happened yet at this moment. Sunho was bored checking his email in this era. This was almost the only way to receive information from afar. Sunho had no other choice but to wait for news from Jonathan. Right now, the amount of foreign currency Sunho and Jonathan could collect with the $200 million they bet was about $10 billion, even if they bet everything on the collapse of the opposition. They still had to accept it for the transaction to continue. The silver market wasn't that big. The amount of silver traded in the future foreign exchange market every day was less than $10 billion. Sunho worried that he didn't have enough fees to trade in this market, so they had to try to monopolize a favorable position to prepare for tomorrow's incident. Just then, Sunho received an email from Jonathan reporting that preparations for the attack were complete. Sunho couldn't suppress his excitement and lunged to hug the computer. This was truly happy news. It felt like he was entering a dungeon with a bag full of gear. Sunho had once thrown himself into dungeons without being sure if he could return safely, but nonetheless. Now he was trembling for a different reason. Sunho was sure the money was already in his pocket. Even if he had to risk this life, it was fine. The points he had painstakingly accumulated would no longer be worthless just because of bad luck. But Sunho suddenly tightened. His 2 hands. He couldn't afford to be this relaxed anymore. Normal life had made him drop his guard. Sunho held his face, waking himself up. Even though he hadn't been back for a year yet, it felt like the life throughout his original timeline had passed a long, long time ago. After calming down, Sunho immediately drafted an email to reply to Jonathan. Preparation complete. Jonathan, we are going to clear out a major dungeon. This sentence was also Sunho telling himself so as not to forget his original determination. July 2nd, Sunho, although doing an exam in class, his mind was always on the clock. It was 12 o'clock now. There were only 30 minutes left. The Bank of Thailand would announce the use of a floating exchange rate system. That would be the moment everything began, according to what Sunho remembered. In his past life, there was a group that bet that Thailand would surrender. Similarly, there was another group that also bet that Thailand would surrender, but in the middle of July. And finally, it was a group that bet that Thailand would eventually win. According to the progress of events in his past life today, heaven and hell would be clearly divided for these groups. However, because Sun Ho had intervened in the debate, the number of groups betting that Thailand would surrender would decrease significantly. The money from all the groups betting that Thailand would win would all fall into the hands of Sun Ho and Jonathan. Just then, the teacher walked over to remind him, interrupting Sun Ho's train of thought. "Now, Sun Ho, why? Are you spending your time looking at the clock instead of focusing on the test? We're in the middle of an exam." After Sun Ho apologized, the teacher finally let him off the hook. But Sun Ho suddenly noticed something strange. Ordinarily, his homeroom teacher would have remained the same as before the regression, but strangely, he had no memory of this teacher at all. Sun Ho was a bit suspicious, but then quickly forgot about it. Now his mind was already in Thailand. 30 minutes later, the test ended and it was lunchtime. Sun Ho didn't delay and immediately moved. He went to meet his homeroom teacher and asked to leave early because he felt unwell. The homeroom teacher held Sun Ho's test in her hand and said, "Again, Sun Ho, why is it that even though you always claim you're not feeling well every time I see you, you look like you've grown?" "A little bit." "Oh, that's right. You're trying to get a perfect score on the test to leave early, aren't you? Usually you purposely make a few mistakes to avoid a perfect score. I believe you're not the type of student who cuts class to do bad things, so just go." It seemed Sun Ho was very trusted by his homeroom teacher. After that, Sun Ho packed his things, preparing to leave. But suddenly the teacher called him back. "But Sun Ho, you aren't being ostracized by the class, are you? I didn't mean anything by it, I just noticed you're always by yourself." This question caught Sun Ho a bit off guard, and he carefully turned around and bowed. "It's just my personality. I just prefer being alone. Thanks for your concern, ma'am." It seemed this teacher wasn't as simple as she appeared. Sun Ho had a bad feeling about her, but that wasn't important right now. He needed to rush back to get the update from Jonathan as soon as he got home. Sun Ho immediately turned on his computer. Jonathan was already waiting, and the moment he saw Sun Ho was online, he started the call. After talking for a while, Sun Ho had basically grasped the current situation. He anxiously waited for Jonathan's answer. After a moment of hesitation, Jonathan finally replied, "We're at the 30 mark now. We've made 300 times our original investment. Before we pull out, that's about $60 billion. It was an astronomical figure. The moment Sun Ho saw it, it felt like an electric current shot through him and his whole body trembled. He could barely contain his emotions. He had never seen such a huge amount of money before. Even though he had anticipated this beforehand, seeing it with his own eyes was truly terrifying. Sun Ho told Jonathan via message that he would track the exchange rate until the very end, but Jonathan was a bit worried and replied, "The opposition is starting to push back. This means the profits are huge, and I think we should withdraw the funds immediately." Jonathan was acting just like an analyst reporting to his boss. Perhaps he was trying to suppress his own emotions. This was the moment Sun Ho needed to be the most focused. He quickly replied to Jonathan as they had agreed upon earlier. "I will be the one to decide when we pull the money out. Don't worry so much about the opposition's counterattacks. With today's announcement, everything will be turned upside down." Jonathan, at this moment, was constantly updating the situation. The value of the bot was falling relentlessly at a dizzying speed. Even though Sun Ho knew the rate would keep dropping until it was all over, witnessing trillions of one disappearing right before his eyes gave him a feeling he couldn't stop trembling from. Even when he had to risk his own life, he had never trembled like this. After calming down, Sun Ho decided to start withdrawing the funds. In the war against the bot, the main force for the hedge fund alliance was the spot market. Using the futures market was just one of Sun Ho's tactics. Those participating in the futures market weren't necessarily going to succeed. They were just playing a supporting role in reducing the risks of the spot market. And Sun Ho had put every cent he had into the futures market with 50 times leverage, no less. Even though it was a crazy and irrational move, he had won the bet and was reaping a massive profit at this point. Sun Ho and Jonathan had to pull all the money out. Just as Sun Ho predicted, something had happened differently from what occurred in history because of his intervention. The bot. It was rising very quickly and regaining its value. The other hedge funds had also received this news. Everyone was nervously watching the situation as the bot continued to climb to the $33 mark, but that was the peak. The price of the bot immediately plummeted uncontrollably. It was just as moody as a crush's personality. "We have to time our move perfectly or else we'll end up with a bitter result." At this moment, Jonathan sent a message reporting that he had successfully withdrawn 80% of the funds. I think we should hold on to the remaining 20% until the expiration. Sanhu understood that Jonathan didn't want to back down and missed the chance to make more money from the bot's collapse, but the war was over. All that was left were scraps for the hyenas. Sanhu instructed Jonathan to wipe all traces and return to Korea to prepare for what was coming next. That day, news all over the world was reporting on this event. The Thai bot had gone into a crisis, hitting its lowest point ever. The bot was exchanged at 30.4 to $1 yesterday due to the implementation of the floating exchange rate system, approved by the central bank. A sense of dread blanketed Southeast Asia with the bot's collapse. After a long, exhausting flight, the first thing Jonathan did was find Sanhu with a suitcase full of money in his hand. Jonathan looked haggard, as if he could collapse at any moment. After placing the suitcase on the table, Jonathan said with a serious expression, "During the withdrawal process, the amount we got was lower than expected." Sunho's attitude was affected by this. That wasn't entirely unexpected. "So how much?" Jonathan just held up his hand in front of his face. $50 billion. Hearing this number, Sunho felt dizzy. For the past few days, both of them hadn't been able to eat or sleep properly. They felt like they were on the verge of a stroke. After trying to compose himself, Sanhu spoke up. "Jonathan, let's calm down and get to work first. This is just the beginning of the crisis. Pay attention to your health. The Asian economy, Malaysia and Indonesia won't be dragged into it, but Hong Kong. It'll be soon." As soon as he heard about Hong Kong, Jonathan's eyes lit up. His spirit seemed to recover when hearing about a new market. But first, there was something Sunho needed Jonathan to help with to get started. There were some plots of land in Korea that the two of them needed to buy. Suddenly, Jonathan fell into a mysterious space. Before him was a giant. It reached out its hand and grabbed Jonathan. Even though Jonathan tried to struggle, he couldn't escape this power. At this moment, Jonathan finally saw the face of the thing squeezing him clearly. It was actually Sunho. But it turned out it was all just a nightmare. Jonathan jolted awake, his face filled with terror. A flight attendant approached to announce that the flight had arrived. The destination Jonathan was headed to this time was the world's #1 superpower, the United States. While sitting in the car returning to the company, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about the dream earlier. Perhaps because he had been under too much stress, he had such a childish nightmare. Right now, Jonathan recalls his conversation with Sunho from the other day. When Sunho mentioned wanting to buy land, Jonathan assumed he was getting into real estate, but Sunho's response took him by surprise. "Jonathan, real estate is just the beginning. From here on out, we'll be doing business in every market. If there's money to be made, we'll be there." Jonathan could hardly believe his ears. He never expected that $50 billion was just startup capital for Sunho. Tense, Jonathan asked, "Sunho, tell me, nothing bad is going to happen to us, right?" Sensing his anxiety, Sunho handed Jonathan a steak to calm him down. "Eat first. You look incredibly stressed. Start by use my shares as collateral and split up the company. If you want in, you should invest as much as you can." As he ate, Jonathan asked, "By splitting it up, just how many companies are you envisioning?" Sunho turned serious. "The more complex the structure, the better. We need to make it impossible for anyone to trace who is really behind it all. We need to reach a level where even the people working inside the company don't know who they're really working for." These words implied something huge. Sunho was proposing the creation of hundreds of shell companies, complete with all the necessary paperwork. This was a massive, blatant conspiracy. Sunho continued. "You must have struggled being all alone for so long. As we move into Hong Kong, we need to assemble a team. Skills aren't what matter most. We only care about loyalty and honesty." Hearing these requirements, Jonathan already had a few ideas in mind, but Sunho's plan wasn't finished yet. "After we achieve the results we want in Hong Kong, we should buy 2 mid-sized investment firms and name them the Guff Group, the place where you used to work. Focus on gathering as many experts as you can, someone like Jeffrey K., for instance." Hearing that name, Jonathan's expression turned to pure shock. "Good God, a corporate raider, are you saying that I should put a top-tier star under my command?" It sounded like a dream, but Sunho took it in stride. "We'll let them use our resources, but we must never let them see who is actually running things from within. Once the company split is complete, I want one of them named Jolin, and it will be based here. I'll use it to acquire a few things locally." Jolene was actually the name of Sunho's father. It was a secret for now, but one day, Sunho would tell him, Sunho really is a dutiful son. Finally, Sunho concluded, Jonathan, we need to focus and get this done immediately. From now on, we don't have time to just sit on this mountain of cash. The time will come when all the money in the world is in our hands. Don't you think so? These words directly awakened the monster inside Jonathan. The global economy was about to be turned upside down by the Jonathan Investment Fund. As agreed, Sunho's name would never be mentioned. Jonathan would get all the fame he desired. After arriving at the company, Jonathan walked straight into the conference room. Everyone inside stared at him stunned. But Jonathan was incredibly energized and confident. He spoke up, Everyone, how long were you planning on sitting there with blank faces? We finally moved into the big leagues. Welcome, this is the Jonathan Investment Company. The atmosphere was electric. Every member was infinitely inspired and ready to tackle any demand. There is a type of monster called a driver ant. They march in groups of hundreds of thousands at a time, destroying everything in their path. They are always ravenous. Hedge funds and their supporters are exactly the same. They moved into Southeast Asia and set up camp there. But history has changed. The money they could have had is now in Sunho's pockets. They need to catch up with the changes. According to the newspaper Sunho was reading, a single group had cornered the Thai bot on the 1st of July and sucked all the nectar for by themselves. Obviously, the identities of Sunho and Jonathan remained secure, and no one knew a thing. At this moment, Sunho was preparing a contract to lease a new office. Even though he was underage, money could solve a lot of problems. Sunho had more than enough to lease an office, a 2-year contract paid in full up front. The cash deposit and the transaction were done using only Sunho's name on the paperwork. All of this was clearly illegal, but it was mutually beneficial as the money would go directly into the slush fund of the introducer Chairman Choi. He led Sunho to the new office. There was a very simple reason why Sunho chose to rent this space. High security and an ADSL modem. Finally, Sunho could escape that snail-paced old modem. It was truly a tear-jerking relief. Sunho held the new modem in his hands, feeling deeply moved. When the room was empty, Sunho paced around wondering if he should redecorate. Before Jonathan returned, numb. Instead, Sunho stuck a picture of a dog-headed monster on the wall. That was the monster he would have to face soon. And this would become the first front line. Jonathan had long since started reporting on the new progress. He had finished the splitting process for the new startups. 8 groups had been chosen to proceed to the next step. Every time they achieved something, he would switch companies. In this way, the groups whispering about the division of the latest company would have no idea what they were facing. All Jonathan cared about was the paperwork and the work at hand. There were now nearly 1,000 different types of taxes. The commissions were indescribably high. Sunho would have to plan out the fund distribution himself. After checking in on the situation with Jeffrey, Sunho mentioned the issue to address with Jonathan, guessing it was the top priority for the acquisition. However, try to endure CEO Donan Finn until everything is finished. Jonathan asked, isn't a simple investment concept to take over Donan? What Jonathan said was true. It wasn't just a simple concept. The dot-com bubble burst had led to massive market capitalization values. But that wasn't the main reason. The data language they created had already been recognized as the industry standard since the 80s. From dungeons, monsters, and skills to stat points and drop rates. This is all classified information strictly managed within the system. It's the most vital data in existence. It's directly linked to Lee San's main company Zoo, a database for the revolutionary faction. If only Sunho had been able to access the data they collected back then, the war against the 8 great evils and the 8 great saints might have played out a little differently. Of course, Sunho knows that his interference will alter the course of history. It's no different from making changes within an internal development team. Therefore, keeping the frequency of those changes to a minimum is crucial. After a moment of reflection, Sunho messages Jonathan, our priority is to predict. You can acknowledge Donald at the highest level because of his salary and stock options in the industry, but he might still decide to back out, and there's nothing we can do about that. Jonathan hears this and decides to follow Sunho's lead. He now has absolute faith in this kid. As for Sunho, he's burning with determination to strip the 8 great evils and 8 great saints of all their power. He will be the one to put an end to their reign. The next day when Sunho is preparing to leave the house, He hears some interesting news on the TV. The ISIN Financial Service will host a major meeting on the 21st to kick off a venture project with gold. Wish, an overseas investment firm. They've decided to build a centralized investment system. Gold Wish is just a shell company that Sun Ho created. He feels a bit bad for the government for taking the bait and moving to discuss the deal. Foreign capital is being drained like a low tide. Perhaps they are just desperate to get their hands on it. Sun Ho carefully puts on his shoes and gets ready to head out, telling his mom he's going to boxing practice. Seeing her son leave, his mom walks over. "You mentioned Young Ho coming over to play a few times." "Mom has heard about him a few times now, but I've never seen him. He's your best friend, isn't he?" Hearing this, Sun Ho is a bit flustered. He can't exactly invite an imaginary friend over to the house. Sun Ho is racking his brain, wondering how to answer when his mom changes the subject. "Anyway, do you plan on continuing with boxing?" Seeing the bruises on her son's face. Sun Ho's mom looks a bit worried. Sun Ho realizes this and says he'll quit if she's worried, but she immediately fires back. "Oh, look at this kid!" "That's not what I meant. It must be tough, but I'm still happy that you're practicing so consistently." "You can do whatever you want, son." Of course, how could a mother not care about her child's health? Even though Sun Ho has shown unusual behavior since he was little, he has always received full support from his parents. After saying goodbye to his mom, Sun Ho pulls up his hood and starts jogging. His destination is a high-rise building. Sun Ho has rented out the ground floor of this building and built the most modern online network, the #1 digital bank in South Korea. Sun Ho slowly blends into the crowd and enters through the entrance reserved for executives or high-ranking staff members. He overhears an interesting conversation. A man asks his assistant, "Aiden Kim, the stuff the doctor gave you. This is it, right?" The assistant immediately replies, "No, I've already verified it. The ones who monopolized the market crash and the ones who liquidated a large amount of companies on July 2nd, they're all in on it together." They never imagined the person they were talking about was standing right next to them. The man is shocked. "Are they gods or what? If they managed to clear everything out like that, the amount of money they pocketed is unimaginable." That can't be a joke. They must have planned it meticulously. Then an assistant reports that there is activity in the Philippines, Singapore, and a few other places. The only remaining spot is Hong Kong. After some thought, the man realizes the next target Sun Ho and Jonathan are aiming for is Hong Kong. He orders all his assistants to prepare all the documents and to organize a meeting immediately. He wants to catch up with those two right away. Sun Ho, standing right next to them, just smiles. "Catch up with us, huh? The biggest bank in the world is probably in a similar state, right? But how could they possibly catch up to us? We dissolved into countless shell companies a long time ago." Sun Ho walks away. He is now a hidden tycoon who can heavily influence the world economy. Sometime later, Jonathan returns to South Korea. He is surprised to see Sun Ho's workspace. "This is a gym, not an office." Jonathan happily tries out the training equipment, but he has absolutely no idea how to use any of it. Watching an A-rank hunter struggle like that, Sun Ho can't help but laugh. Jonathan discovers that the room isn't just full of training equipment. There's also a pair of real swords. He asks in astonishment if Sun Ho actually knows how to use them. After all, Sun Ho is still just a level 2 kid. He didn't expect the kid to be playing with swords like this. Right then, Sun Ho changes the subject. "Can I see the data I asked you to prepare?" Jonathan immediately pulls out a heavy notebook. This is the list of companies. That only exists on paper, which Jonathan set up. Sun Ho carefully checks the information in the notebook. It contains details on over 1,000 shell companies that the two of them own. Suppose they lost this notebook, they would never know where their money went or how much there was. And the suppose here means there would be no issue in manipulating the operating funds. But Jonathan seems quite worried if anyone else sees this list. The two of them could face life in prison in the US, a sentence of about 1,000 years. But Sun Ho isn't worried about this at all. He calmly tells Jonathan if the jury and the lawyers are well arranged, oversees tax evasion and conversely embezzlement of public funds, etc. if necessary, I can totally use money to solve everything. Everything I've done up until now was to create that kind of money. All of them are criminals. The only difference is, that's just the scale of them, Sun Ho said, walking over to the photocopier to make a copy. After copying the list, he offered to keep the original. Jonathan didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. He had a feeling that everything would eventually fall into place. After that, Sun Ho opened the safe and handed Jonathan a stack of cash. All right, you must be exhausted, so just get some rest. From now on, remember, never use credit cards. Use cash only. Dealing like this felt just like being a criminal, but Jonathan didn't complain. He trusted Sun-ho completely. After wrapping things up, Sun-ho said goodbye and promised to meet Jonathan again tomorrow. Just then, Jonathan noticed the monster drawings hanging on the wall. They looked quite scary and realistic. Jonathan thought to himself that Sun-ho was still just a kid who loved magical drawings, but he could never have guessed that he would actually face these terrifying monsters in the future. At D.P. Graham, one of the 4 largest banks in North America. Emily from Jonathan Investment was arriving to make a trade with the bank. The bank employee, after reviewing the contract, spoke up. "It's a pleasure to meet you. This is a new type of currency swap transaction. I will review it as usual, but I don't want to waste your time." Who would agree to this condition? For those who don't know, a currency swap is the simultaneous buying and selling of the same amount of foreign currency. Only 2 currencies are used in the transaction at the same time. Emily calmly reminded the other party to check the contract carefully again. Jonathan Investment was party B. The bank employee heard all this and checked it once more. He was absolutely stunned and immediately notified his superiors because he personally did not have the authority to assess this situation. The bank's board of directors then arrived and held a discussion with Emily. According to the contract terms, if everything was taken, the interest rate for the Hong Kong side would increase by 100%, but the returns for Jonathan Investment would decrease rapidly. After carefully checking the contract, the bank director asked Emily how much she wanted. The figure of 500 million made him unable to hold back his laughter. Even Emily found the whole thing ridiculous. Raising interest rates to 50% was already insane. But 100%. How could there be any profit? "Jonathan, you bastard, did you call me here just to do this stupid thing?" The bank director agreed to sign the contract immediately. He had read it over and over again. There were no traps in the contract. After signing, both sides were satisfied because they got exactly what they wanted. After receiving the information, Jonathan immediately reported back to Sun-ho, "I've cleared $5 billion. It turned out everything was part of Sun-ho's plan. Flashback to 2 months ago in October. Sun-ho went to the office and saw Jonathan slumped over his computer screen. Beside him was a mountain of fast food trash. It looked like he had been living there for days. Sun-ho walked over and asked, "How much have you lost?" Jonathan covered his face in disappointment. "You know it, I can't even count anymore. With so many different types of betting on this global stock market, it's pretty hard not to get caught. The stock market, except for the Asian region, is maintaining steady growth. Even though Sun-ho already knew it, witnessing the collapse of the stock market was still hard to swallow." Jonathan looked at the computer screen with a gloomy face. He didn't intend to listen to everything Sun-ho said, but an interest rate of 300% was truly unbelievable. When he heard Sun-ho say that Hong Kong would destroy the stock market, Jonathan's jaw dropped in shock. He couldn't believe that Hong Kong would do such a thing, but Sun-ho had checked it out. This was the only way to drive all the traders away. Jonathan thought they wouldn't give up so easily, but Sun-ho, I didn't think so. Hong Kong and Japan were the 2 financial pillars of Asia. Sun-ho wanted to trade with Japan, but if he pushed too hard, the government there wouldn't just sit by, so that left only South Korea. At that time, South Korea had issued a financial policy to prevent all foreign investment and interference. That was why traders targeted Southeast Asia and made everything worse. They targeted Hong Kong, a region incapable of winning against South Korea, and scared all the investors from South Korea into running away, forcing international banks to withdraw their money instead of lending it to companies. Because of that, South Korea slowly collapsed from within. The fear of national bankruptcy gradually increased. That was when the investors began to execute the deals that had been planned in advance. But this time, everything would be different. Sun-ho decided to enter the Hong Kong stock market and stir things up a bit. Sun-ho and Jonathan started working on the plan together immediately. The amount of money poured in kept increasing. $100 million. $1 billion. The heavy chemical industrial network, the entire sector, was being interfered with. Stock prices for all enterprises in Hong Kong were falling except for the banks. They still needed to reassure them. Just then, Jonathan frantically announced, "Sun-ho, there's a group of people behind us." Sunho was extremely tense upon hearing that. If they got caught now, everything would be over. Sunho told Jonathan it's too early to conclude, but, "Jonathan, you must protect the company in New York right now." Jonathan immediately ran to the phone to contact the New York side. Now, if they were careful, they could find the investors attacking Hong Kong. Sunho immediately started trading. He could use his excellent investment techniques in the stock market to find the tail. Individual investors could run away at any time, but companies were different. This was the moment everything would be brought to light. Whether life would flourish or end in a dead end would be decided. At this very second, the hedge fund at this moment was gradually increasing. Sunho and Jonathan had no choice but to pray. If the Hong Kong stock market was destroyed in their hands, history would change, and Sunho wouldn't be able to predict the future anymore. Finally, after many hours of intense struggle, Sunho and Jonathan managed to keep the Hong Kong stock market from collapsing. Both of them could finally breathe a sigh of relief. That was close. Everything almost ended there. They decided to arrange everything according to the timeline and stop. "Here, that's enough exhaustion for today." After that, Sunho changed his clothes, preparing to go home after a long, stressful day. Back to the present, the DP Graham Bank director was happily chatting with his colleagues about the $500 million deal. After hearing about it, these people laughed out loud. They continuously congratulated the bank director for earning a huge windfall just dropped from the sky, and even the bank manager is secretly rejoicing. Deep down, he thought he'd be fired after that massive loss in Thailand, but everything feels hopeful now. He thanks the Jonathan Investment Fund for saving him from a total disaster, but he's immediately slapped in the face by reality. The news is broadcasting reports about Hong Kong. Interest rates have spiked to 400%. Everyone in the room freezes for a long moment. Once they snap out of it, they frantically call their assistants to check the situation. The bank manager suddenly remembers the previous contract. He thought it was a sweet deal, but it turns out it's a total trap. If interest rates hit 80% of the amount the bank has to pay will be $2 billion. The bank manager is stunned, sweating bullets. He has no idea where he went wrong. Meanwhile, in Seoul, the happiest people are probably just Jonathan and Sunho. Jonathan is checking the market conditions and keeps shouting, "You've done it again." This madman. It's not just Hong Kong stock markets everywhere in the world are plummeting. Spot trading futures. Trading everything is crashing. We're making a fortune on this. The spread of the Asian financial crisis is creating a domino effect. Black Monday has hit Hong Kong, the US, and Japan. Stock prices are in free fall, dragging Europe down with them. Once again, the jackpot has landed on Sunho and Jonathan. This is just the beginning. In this new era, people say blessings are unpredictable and bad luck is hard to foresee, but the financial power Sunho holds and will crush everything. Before long, Jonathan makes it onto the list of the world's billionaires. He is known as the stock investor who can predict the future, the king of investment. Sunho isn't too surprised when he hears the news. The only thing he cares about is whether his identity has been exposed. Jonathan calmly replies that if they knew who he was, it would be a disaster. They only know that 51% of the risk in Jonathan's investment is held by an unknown person called John. Jonathan will do his best to protect Sunho's identity. He even hired experts for this. The next issue is the tax authorities. If they get a whiff of anything, the two of them will be in trouble. Jonathan reports, "We have monopolized all the profits from Thailand, and we even won the bet against the world's largest bank. I calculated the company's value in New York to be around $22 billion. So currently the assets John has are $11.2 billion, and I have $10.7 billion. We are ranked 18th and 20th on the world billionaire list, respectively. Oh, right, if you count all the money collected from the shell companies after the inflation, we would be number 1 and 2. This is just insane. Think about it. Who would have expected a middle school kid to be the top player on the server of the Earth? Winter has arrived. Sunho walks down the street toward the office. The faces on the road are gloomy, drained of life. 1 week after the event in Hong Kong, the South Korean government requested a bailout from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. This time it's 2 weeks earlier than in the previous life. Sunho is at the office today to interview someone he's been wanting to recruit. From afar, Sunho already recognized who that person was. All eyes are on her. After basic greetings, Sunho and Jamie head to a quiet place to talk privately. Before the conversation even starts, Sunho hands Jamie his business card, and of course it has a fake name on it. Jamie is a bit confused and asks, "I want to ask you first, is this move because of my appearance or because you actually care about your candidates?" Sunho replies, "If it were just a normal interview, I wouldn't have given you my card. We've already decided to hire you." Jamie is touched, but still hesitant. Sunho notices this and adds, "Your past doesn't matter, Jamie. We only care about your appearance and your profile on this land of Yoido. We need a beautiful Asian woman who is an expert in real estate to be our representative. Soon you will understand why. Your appearance is so important." Yoido had sent Jamie to the core investment office in Asia, a smart, quick-witted, and strategic person who turned negative perceptions about the company into positive ones. But the key is that she is willing to do anything to close a deal, even if it's illegal. Her criminal record is extremely impressive for an office setting. She was once a CEO and a major shareholder, but after stabbing her former employees in the back and embezzling profits, she was arrested, and for a short time. Sunho had been searching for someone like her since August, but Jamie hadn't even heard of Sunho's company before. How could she agree to come work for them? At this moment, Sunho confidently says, "Jolin, the Jolin Investment Company, that is the name of the company you will be working for." Not long after that, the news reports on the partnership between the Jolin Investment Company and the South Korean government, and the representative for the Jolin side is none other than Jamie. Watching this on TV, Sunho is very satisfied. Right at that moment, someone opens the door and walks in. As soon as she sees Sunho, she speaks, "Congratulations, you've now become the most sought-after person in the political and business worlds across the whole country." The person who just walked into the room is Jamie. Being complimented like that, even she feels a bit shy. Afterward, Sunho gives her a card and instructs her company card. "Always keep money in the linked account. That way there won't be a separate statement for the places you use it." Even though he essentially told her to embezzle funds, Jamie remains as calm as if nothing happened. This is truly the most suitable person Sunho needs. Sunho then asks Jamie about hiring more people. The company will cover all expenses within the investment capital. Sunho will only participate in special directives. After confirming the terms, Jamie replies, "My former colleagues will arrive tonight. I also have to negotiate with the domestic real estate advisory firm, and the Samwoo accounting group and the Kim law firm will send people. In this country, every issue is solved in those two places. Chief Accountant Cho De-hwan and Director in charge of legal affairs Park Jong-sik." Sunho naturally knows these two names. They are known as the elite class in the business world. Both are good choices for their current positions. Now they just need to find an office. Jamie points to the building in front of them and says that the building is for sale. Not only that, the price will keep dropping. The reason is that more than half of the tenants have left. The cause of this is that not long ago, Jamie organized a meeting at the Blue House to carry out the special directives Sunho gave. As a result, the real estate market was opened half a year earlier than before. Fire sale is the term for when a disaster happens. With property owners being forced to sell off assets at fire sale prices, the situation in South Korea was even worse. Jimmy stared at the building in front of her. Driven by a fierce ambition, I have a knack for real estate, but I can't stop myself from calculating opportunities in other markets. This chance won't... Oh, come again, Ethan. Are your clients interested in domestic real estate? Sanhu said that the only thing his clients care about is the return on investment, not limited to real estate, but all other sectors as well. However, this will come with responsibility. Jimmy heard this and replied, "Surely the returns in this country will be massive. As long as you have the money, even a child could sit in the chairman's seat. If that's the case, they might understand that we can expand into companies. A massive amount of shares from the largest corporations in the nation will inevitably fall into the hands of foreign businesses. This is an ideal country for business. I know that, but the better I understand it, the more interested I become. Thank you for giving me this chance. I want to show you something harmless." Sanhu's expression turned stern. He knew full well that Jimmy was trying to manipulate him, but Sanhu was not some naive kid who didn't understand the world. In the post-apocalyptic world, he had realized there was something even more terrifying than monsters, the nature of human beings. Sanhu's eyes had suddenly flared, emitting a chilling aura. He immediately cut Jimmy off. "I understand you want to say what you want, but that's enough. I won't be participating in the Jolene investment firm, that's for sure. I also hope you prove worthy of the trust my clients have placed in you, but you must strictly follow my special instructions. I understand. If you want to expand the business with the investment firm, I think you should recruit people from the loan branches of the 3 major banks. Jimmy now felt the chilling aura and shivered. Only now did she realize that her boss was not as simple as he appeared. The special instructions Sanhu gave her regarding money transactions was fine, but that other thing was what really mattered. South Korea and the dungeon. In a remote, isolated mountain, Sanhu was carefully assessing the situation. It had taken him some time to buy this mountain and locate the dungeon. Here, because this place was completely different from when Sanhu first arrived in his previous life. Back then, this place was like a military base. The military's power at that time was overwhelming. The hills and detention camps were under government control, and martial law was strictly enforced. This perhaps would not happen again. Just like Sanhu, the survivors who returned from the laboratory were called the reserve force. They were taken to government research facilities, thinking they would become lab rats. However, when facing the door to the testing area, Sanhu realized this was even worse than being a lab rat. Back in the present, Sanhu waited from morning until night to finally meet the contractor. The contractor was a simple, honest uncle named Choi Chun-min. After introducing themselves, the two got in the car and drove deep into the mountains. The entire route would be the construction zone Sanhu had designated. The uncle was astonished. By now, they had already been driving for 20 minutes. This construction area, I can't even imagine how vast it truly is. On the way, Sanhu outlined the construction requirements. Work would begin at the entrance and during the excavation. They had to keep the area as intact as possible. A moment later, they both had to get out of the car because they couldn't go any further. At this spot, Sanhu asked the uncle if it was possible to build a building and a road there. Sanhu asked multiple times just to be sure, because it was winter and the scale was quite large. The uncle hesitated and thought for a long time. Destroying a mountain to build a road and a whole building was no simple task. But due to the current economic situation, the uncle had no other work left, so he couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. I can do it. The uncle clenched his fists and agreed with Sanhu. He would finish this job. Sanhu smiled faintly and turned back to the car. Please complete it as quickly as possible. Once you've measured everything, what we fear is time, not money. I will receive the estimated data from other companies, but I need you to complete this work. The uncle wondered why Sanhu wanted him to take on such a massive project. Sanhu glanced at the photo of the uncle and his daughter on the windshield and said, "Isn't this a difficult time for fathers?" Hearing this, the uncle couldn't hold back his tears and wept like a child. He didn't expect that in such tough times. There were still kind people left. On the last day of the year, Sanhu's father returned home drunk. Sanhu wasn't very surprised because on this day in his previous life, his father was in a similar state. That was the day he was imprisoned until his death due to an honorable retirement from his youth, but Sanhu couldn't have foreseen that this time his father would find a new job at a company that shared his own name. Life is full of surprises. His father, of all things, Sanhu was working for his own son's company. Sanhu recalled that in his previous life it was his father's influence that led him into the financial world. His father had given him a bank book containing 1,000,000 won and told him to buy stocks. 1,000,000 won was a huge sum for a high school student like Sanhu back then. Shortly after the IMF crisis ended, it was a period where even a monkey could make money. 1,000,000 won became 1.2 million, then 1.3 million. Before he realized it, Sanhu had become an investor. The path to success was paved with luck. His initial success was so great that he even asked his father to invest more. Sanhu's father happily agreed, but this time, he wouldn't give it for free. He would only lend it. Not long after, everything went downhill fast. Right after the dot-com bubble burst, half of the money and then the other half vanished. Sanhu was crying after losing the precious 2,000,000 won he had borrowed from his father when a voice like a thunderclap rang in his ears. His father, cold and stern, said, "Son, the money I lent you earlier, at the very latest, you must pay me back in full by next week. You can borrow from your mother to pay me back. Right now, I really need that money." Sanhu was in absolute despair at that moment. Where could he possibly find 1,000,000 won to pay his father back? Now, but his father showed no mercy. If you don't ask for it, you'll have to give me your allowance every time you receive it, and I will also take your CD player, phone, and computer. But like that, it's still nothing compared to the money Dad lent me. I know, but I still have to talk to Mom about this. Talk to her at the end of the day. You're grown up now, but don't go against her wishes. Who knows? If you listen to her, she might lend you the money. Dad meant that the reason he was fired is something he wants you to know. I hope you're as passionate about finance as you are about stocks. Your current situation is just a drop in the bucket compared to the days when I was fired, Dick. So this is what they call the villain's past. Sunho's dad really is the father of the year, turning his own son into his debtor since middle school. No wonder Sunho, after regressing, he wanted to earn that much money. Naming the company after his dad. The kid must still be bitter about that. Back to the present. Sunho is supervising the construction progress at the mountain. Everything is going very smoothly. Chairman Choi looks very confident and calm. He's built a great team and is confident that he has good connections with everyone. At this moment, Sunho notices the attitude of the local villagers around here. On the way back, Sunho says he wants to build a community hall in the village next to the mountain to appease the villagers. Even though this might not be necessary, Sunho will later control access by putting up fences around the entire base of the mountain. This is to prepare for in case should someone stumbles upon a dungeon, but it also has the potential to anger the surrounding villagers. When doing big things, you can't just force them. You need a solution to smooth things out properly. In this case, building a hall is the right move. Meanwhile, at a fancy restaurant, the accounting director and the legal affairs director of Jonin Investment are comfortably drinking. These two are preparing a plan of their own targeting the Daeho Group. Will this plan actually work? January 1998. Amid the wake of high interest rates, many companies went bankrupt, announcing production cuts. The remaining large companies caused a storm of unemployment. Even the fishing agreement signed with Japan, which took advantage of the severe financial crisis, fell apart. Sunho is reading the newspaper intently. At first, not much changed, but things are getting more and more different due to Sunho's interference. But a few things are still stable, for example, the DPRK and Taezaman Bank are not participating until the second quarter of this year. The reason is that these places are all places where Sunho made them lose money. They became desperate because of their losses. They plan to join in the first quarter and pull out as much as possible. That's because the whole country is sitting on a ticking time bomb. Sunho couldn't have predicted this far. But he didn't think he would succeed either. The three largest conglomerates in Korea are Daehan Daeho and Usung. Daeho ranks second in the world, so it's higher than Usung. Both groups are more internationally famous than Daehan. They have about 400 branches in other countries, 100,000 employees in Korea, and 200,000 international employees. While Sunho is working out, he receives news from Jimmy. The chairman of Daeho will be ordered to be arrested tonight. This makes Sunho a bit surprised, so he stops to hear the details. Daeho Group's bankruptcy wasn't just because of the IMF, but all their problems will only explode 2 years later. But now Daeho is thriving and having issues. Through Jimmy, Sunho understands the root cause. Everything is because of two people, Ho Da-won and Park Jong-suk. Both of them are in politics and they are constantly meeting with major politicians. Those two people made Daeho the scapegoat for the IMF, even though Daeho itself had no flaws. But Sunho doesn't think the government will just put up with that. That's right. At this moment, Jimmy's voice becomes dangerous. That's why I decided to get involved in this. We will soon meet the #1 group in the financial sector. Sunho realizes. This is the moment Daeho begins to collapse. The winning rate for the elites used to be quite high because even in peaceful times, many people think of ways to attack, others to gain benefits for themselves, and how to take down those who are stronger. Looking at those people, everything becomes logical. Sunho smiles slyly and says to Chacha, "Both you and those two are amazing." After that, Jimmy continues. The documents about Daeho held by the government have been handed over to the court. All they want is an investment of at least $500 million and Daeho's compromise as well as their debts. Of course, if they put in a little more effort, getting the subsidiary is enough. But Jimmy still needs a little more time to understand the Korean financial and political world. The next leadership will belong to the Democratic Party. If Sunho is the only side to benefit, it won't avoid the scrutiny of the government. When the financial crisis eases, they will surely open a more thorough tax investigation. Those two directors aren't targeting wealth or trading. Their real goal is to maintain Daeho's position in the top 3. It's not just a title, it's the real top 3. After thinking for a while, Sunho says to Jimmy, "Jimmy, can you handle Daeho? You're not planning to bring in leadership from abroad after taking it over, right? Investigate their new chairman starting from the board members. Go to his closest associates, including his family." Jimmy is extremely surprised when she hears this. Ho Do-won and Park Jong-suk were saying the exact same things. Sunho then pours a cup of coffee and continues, "Jimmy, don't worry about the extra investment or business direction. Just do your best. Whether it's land, real estate, or even that group, don't let them be snatched away. Jonin Investment must monopolize Korea's crisis." This is an order as well as a warning for Jimmy. Sunho's demeanor is extremely serious and full of intensity. The next day, Jonathan's flight back to Korea landed. Countless reporters were waiting with the desire to interview the legendary god of investment. Jonathan was a bit overwhelmed by things like this, but suddenly a question caught his interest. "Mr. Jonathan, if I want to get rich, where should I invest? Please, recommend." Jonathan, after being stunned, held up a finger in front of him. "If you want to invest in something, invest in fear." This statement was quickly put on the front page of every newspaper, and this is also the joke that Sunho uses to tease Jonathan when they meet this time. Jonathan came to Korea specifically to meet Sunho. Before they could even greet each other, the two talked about the current economic situation in Korea. Korea is currently being financially supported, and Sunho is also constantly pumping in dollars, so this country will soon overcome the crisis. Jonathan held the bottle of wine in his hand, took a deep drink, and then asked Sunho. Regarding the Daeho situation, Sunho says this wasn't his plan, but he's still involved. He just handed the knife to Jonin Investment. The rest is their doing. Sunho's intention is to take over the entire Daeho group, then restructure it and clear all the debt. Jonathan doesn't understand why Sunho is taking such a risk, but Sunho just laughs and says, "Because the US dollar isn't always the strongest. The crisis will end soon, and I'm preparing for that moment." Jonathan smirks. "You're quite the patriot, aren't you? Money isn't the only reason you want Daeho, is it? You don't need to be ashamed of being a patriot. If you've got money, you can do whatever you want." Suddenly, Sunho turns serious. $1 billion. I want an extra billion. Plus the $1.5 billion that's about to be transferred, we will move $2.5 billion into the country at the exact same time as the takeover of Daeho. Jonathan's face immediately drains of color. He clutches his head and warns him, "Sunho, think carefully. If you keep doing this, you'll be sentenced to 100 million years in prison. Don't be reckless. If you want to, the tax authorities will sniff it out soon enough." But Sunho isn't worried in the slightest. "You don't need to rush. The government is the one that needs to hurry. $2.5 billion. This is the opportunity to launder that money." Jonathan can't believe his ears. He gulps down the entire bottle of liquor in his hand and asks, "Sunho, how could you think of using an entire country to launder money? This is truly unbelievable." When the tax investigation ends, the Daeho group falls into a state of debt relief. Debt relief is the standard process for a debt-ridden nation to pay off foreign debt, including restructuring, adjusting, and providing new capital. No CEO resigns. This is quite rare. Except for the chairman's family, everyone else keeps their positions. Right now, Sunho is listening to the takeover report from Jimmy. Everything seems to be under control. Sunho hangs up to handle the situation at hand. A group of punks is being forced to do push-ups by him for bullying the wrong person. After being taught a lesson, they become as quiet as mice, not daring to make a peep. After a few threats, Sunho lets them go. Anyway, these small-time losers aren't of any use for his training. Afterward, Sunho prepares to head back to class. As he walks, he wonders what excuse to use this time. Just then, his homeroom teacher calls him aside. She is quite concerned about Sunho having no friends at school, but Sunho isn't listening to a single word. He is busy thinking about something else. Sunho is certain that during this period his homeroom teacher will be someone else. He has ignored it because it's just a small change, but he is quite worried about her attitude toward him. Sunho needs to look into this. He has hired some experts to investigate his homeroom teacher over the past few days. Yu Yeon-hee, 24 years old, born in Seoul, the eldest child of an average family, no interest in working. Hard and doesn't have many social connections, leading to the fact that she doesn't contact her friends often. Up to this point, she seems to be just a person who doesn't fit in. But there are two quite interesting points. First, she has known Sun-ho before. Based on the investigation, she is very interested in a specific type of person. While not to the point of being mentally ill, you could say she is an eccentric. The problem is that Sun-ho is also someone she is interested in. She has known Sun-ho since he was in elementary school. After passing the interview, she seems to have worked quite hard to become Sun-ho's homeroom teacher. The second thing, according to her psychiatric treatment records, the prescriptions she received were only standard ones for things like depression or anxiety. But she also presented some other symptoms. Because of this, she gradually detached from her family. Medication can't help her even if she continues to take them because her delusions and hallucinations are real. She is an extremely rare therapist. That evening, Sun-ho thinks continuously about the homeroom teacher. The reason therapists are so rare is not just because of their abilities, but also because they don't have much capacity to survive after awakening. They can influence other people's minds just with their own abilities. Although they don't talk to each other after going through the trials, they are pushed into a corner, and they also have to experience the fatigue of awakened ones. When passing the initial trial, they simply couldn't endure it. In the teacher's case, it's perhaps harder to guess because she awakened even before everything fell apart. Sun-ho is certain there is a dark reason behind this. Just then, Sun-ho receives a call from Jonathan. Sun-ho is very happy to get this call. Jonathan is currently in Texas and reporting on the situation. A few days ago, Sun-ho and Jonathan discussed the upcoming plan. Sun-ho's target this time is the god of financial institutions, the asset, estimated to be 5 times larger than building a whole country, the one who deflects wars. The reason Sun-ho was reincarnated into this period is not just because of stats. If it was just for that, there would be no need to come back this far. Sun-ho gave Jonathan a list and instructed him to keep it safe and use it to deal with guests. But it seems Jonathan has completely forgotten about the merger of the small and medium investment firms. Seeing this, Sun-ho can't hold back his anger and shouts, "Refuse all interviews and events if you focus on those things too much, you'll get distracted." Jonathan doesn't make excuses for that, but he doesn't like having someone more talented than him working under him. That's why he frequently avoids others for fear of being noticed. Jonathan wishes Sun-ho would show his face, but that is fundamentally impossible. How shocked would the world be to know that the top player on the Earth server is a middle school brat? Sun-ho has no other choice but to encourage Jonathan to confidently show off his own capabilities. Once the company expands, Jonathan will soon realize it. There is a monster sleeping deep inside that body. Returning to work, Sun-ho mentions that the important people from Bluestone have arrived in Korea. That is the world's largest private equity firm. When Jonathan hears this name, he is also amazed. He wonders if Sun-ho wants to take over that Bluestone company, but Sun-ho shakes his head. Unfortunately, no. If they get hit during the Asian financial crisis, then things would be different, but they are still stable. But there is a vulnerability, which is the Bluestone Capital Partner 3 fund. Jonathan already knew this beforehand. Bluestone is pouring all their heart and soul into their third product. Finally, Sun-ho tells Jonathan to start stirring things up from the bottom. If no members come to Korea, Bluestone's new fund product will become useless. Although that Bluestone company is quite attractive, Sun-ho likes its members better. Blue Rock. 20 years later, Kim Jong-soo, Julian, and Jessica will together make that company grow tremendously. During their golden age, they managed funds of over $4 trillion. But currently, Blue Rock has no one, and it will be the same in the future because the shadow bankers who control the global economy from behind the curtains will have to make room for someone else. Sun-ho's parents. There's no one else, and there never will be. The shadow bankers who pull the strings of the global economy from behind the curtain will have to make room for someone else, Sun-ho. Everyone thinks he's currently studying at the seminary, but in reality, Sun-ho is using his short spring break to head to the States to handle the recruitment of Julian and Jessica before they join Blue Rock to find and analyze the genius Kim Chung-soo, who was dismissed and hushed up, and most importantly, to find someone named Bobby. If they want to find a missing person, Sun-ho must prove a blood relation. To put out a bounty on a criminal, he has to prove he's involved in the case. But finding a beneficiary of a trust fund isn't difficult. Right after landing, Sun Ho immediately went to see investigator John Clark. Sun Ho provided the information he had about the investigator named Bobby, born in Brooklyn, around 12 to 15 years old. He might be in New York. The investigator asked if there was any more information, but Sun Ho could only provide a few physical traits. He made an excuse that he had lost all other records. After hearing this, the investigator reported that this search would cost a lot of time and money, because they would have to search all over North America. Of course, Sun Ho had already anticipated this. But time and money were not an issue. Sun Ho couldn't help but clench his fists. He had to find this Bobby at any cost, because he is going to become the leader of the 8 evils, the man who will be known as the Demon King of New York. At Jonathan's investment firm, Sun Ho presented the files of the people he wanted to recruit. First was Julian. Sun Ho planned to entrust him with a portion of the offshore fund, about $1.5 billion. Jonathan was a bit doubtful about this guy's abilities, but he also completely trusted Sun Ho's eye for talent. Then Sun Ho showed Jonathan something as a gift. At first, Jonathan read it and thought it was an autobiography, but it turned out to be investment research material. This mountain of data helped analyze all of their previous capital investments. It was only natural for Jonathan to look shocked. Sun Ho had borrowed a few theories that had never existed in this world, and this was the gift Sun Ho was giving Jonathan. The introduction, for now, was still left blank. If this book was published under Jonathan's name, no one would ever doubt his expertise again. Jonathan held his head, thinking this was a bit hard to accept. But after some thought, Jonathan decided to soak up the fame until Sun Ho stepped into the light. However, the condition was that Sun Ho had to stop with that formal, distant way of speaking. Age wasn't an issue for Jonathan anymore. Sun Ho was more than a partner. They had become lovers, no-wait friends. Facing this request, Sun Ho was a bit surprised. Among the awakened, there was no concept of friends, but Jonathan still shared his points and loot with Sun Ho because they used to be teammates. But this Jonathan was completely different from the Jonathan Sun Ho once knew. And besides, having an extra friend wouldn't be so bad, right? Sun Ho broke into a happy smile he had never shown before, then reached out to fist bump Jonathan. Whether in this life or the last, they would always be each other's most trusted friends. After spring break ended, Sun Ho returned to Korea and continued his studies. There was a bit of trouble at school. The mother of Yoon-hee came to school and caused a huge scene. The reason was that the school had let someone with a mental illness like her become a teacher. Sun Ho had to delay his plans to confirm if she was an awakened. Today is a more important day than any other. The only place where Sun Ho can increase his stats before the trial is Sun Ho needs to be well prepared to enter the dungeon. Sun Ho headed alone to the mountain he bought. Construction was now fully complete. The entire area was under control. A building wrapped in countless other buildings. This is the entrance to the dungeon. A perfect defense perimeter disguised as a mental hospital. Sun Ho carefully entered the building. After passing through countless reinforced steel doors, he finally arrived at the dungeon entrance. As soon as Sun Ho stepped into the room, a gate suddenly appeared. A system notification popped up to confirm if Sun Ho wanted to enter the dungeon. Sun Ho was a bit nervous about this move. Even though it was only an F-rank dungeon, thinking about going in without any way to escape. Isn't that just walking into the lion's den? But this is the only way. To improve his stats, Sun Ho had no choice but to risk his life. After he pressed confirm, a staircase leading underground suddenly appeared. Sun Ho hesitated for a moment. Before entering the dungeon's range, electronics and every kind of handheld firearm wouldn't work. All Sun Ho could use was the sword he had custom-made at Namdaemun, a bit of pain medication, and emergency food supplies, a crappy survival backpack incomparable to the things Sun Ho had before. But now he had no other choice. Sun Ho had to keep moving forward to become stronger. Before entering the dungeon, Sun Ho sent Jonathan a will. This was in preparation for the worst-case scenario. Jonathan was having a good time, but his expression suddenly changed. He couldn't understand why the hell a kid was writing a will. Meanwhile, Sun Ho was struggling in the dungeon. The first things he needed to eliminate in this dungeon were the dog-headed monsters called Susan, aka Secret Agent Susan. With his meager equipment, right now Sun Ho could barely solo one-on-one with each of them, but the Susans didn't play fair at all. one after another. They swarmed him. Sun-ho was constantly hanging by a thread. In a moment of carelessness, a Susan lunged forward, grabbed Sun-ho's head, and pressed him into the ground. It opened its mouth and breathed onto Sun-ho's face, aiming to choke its opponent with breath that hadn't been brushed in 1,000 years. Because it was so foul, Sun-ho slowly lost his senses. Just when he thought he was about to meet his maker, the monster suddenly collapsed to the ground. A system notification appeared. You have killed Scout Susan, exterminated the Susan tribe, killed Susan warrior. 3 out of 60. It turned out that before the monster lunged, Sun-ho had managed to draw his sword and thrust it forward. This saved his life in the nick of time. Sun-ho used all his strength to push the monster, pinning him down away. Only 3 down, and he was already this exhausted he didn't know how he would deal with the rest. This monster, it was designated as number 0175 of the Susan tribe because it was relatively easy to handle. It was named after its hound-like appearance. Even though Sun-ho had anticipated the current situation that it would be hard to beat 1 or 2 dogs with F-rank stats, but man, this is really pathetic. Sun-ho's already got his backpack packed and ready to go. He's pushing further into the dungeon, a maze type where 3 scouts show up right at the entrance. Since the layout keeps shifting, there's no way to know what's inside. There are 3 total quests in this dungeon. First, kill the boss. Second, a hunting quest. And third, a double quest. The only way to escape the maze is to complete all 3 or use an escape ticket. The reason Sun-ho chose to tackle this dungeon is simple. He knows how to kill the boss, and the escape ticket is a reward. Yeah, you get for finishing the hunting quest. Sun-ho trudges through the dungeon, clutching his left shoulder that he injured earlier. He looks absolutely miserable, risking his life for a hunting quest, even though it's just a basic system task. Just then, a chest suddenly appears in front of him. It's one of those dungeon chests. A lot of Awakeners get fooled because it looks like a copper chest. If they're lucky, they get a reward like a copper chest, but if they're not lucky, they might get a cursed chest that hits the player with fear or psychological manipulation. After weighing his options, Sun-ho decides to skip it. If he gets cursed now, he might not make it out in one piece. Pushing forward a bit more, Sun-ho spots the next door. He carefully sets his bag down and slowly cracks it open. His whole body is trembling, praying under his breath. Behind this door, let there be only one. Please just give me one. But life is never that kind. A whole pack of Susan types is waiting for him. They look toward the door from the shadows, basically saying, "Surprise, motherfucker!" Sun-ho takes one look and slams the door shut, his face looking like he's trying to take a massive dump. This is the worst-case scenario. Sun-ho is forced to use his skill here, God Odin's Wrath. Current rank F, effect. You can strike with lightning to damage your target or imbue your weapon with the lightning element for 30 minutes. Cooldown, 24 hours. Because the current level of the skill is still low, the cooldown is incredibly long. Using it here means Sun-ho has lost his trump card. After activating the skill, the longsword in his hand surges with lightning, drastically increasing its damage output. Now time is money, literally. Sun-ho doesn't hesitate. He kicks the door open and storms in, shouting, "Come on then, you mutts! You know who your daddy is, huh?" Even if they are just dogs, monsters have their own pride, right? How could they stand being insulted like that? The whole pack of Susans, not a single one hesitates. They all charge at once, determined to show this human who's boss, but they all just become target practice for Sun-ho's skill. Sun-ho glides like the wind. Every sword strike echoes like a voice from the void. Q1 hit Q2 right on the edge, Q3 nasty, and that is the solo king. Soon enough, the number of Susan Sun-ho has taken out hits 21. The count has dropped significantly, but his rank F stamina can't keep up with this level of intensity. Sun-ho's sword swings gradually slow down, and he gets blocked by one of the Susan monsters. The other monster sees the opportunity to swarm him. Sun-ho can't even pull his sword out, so he takes every single hit. Blood splatters everywhere. Who knows how much time has passed? Sun-ho lies in a pool of blood, eyes rolled back, surrounded by piles of monster corpses. Is this where his journey ends? Suddenly, Sun-ho snaps back to consciousness, coughing up blood non-stop. He uses every ounce of strength to force himself up. After checking the system, Sun-ho realizes he survived thanks to the passive overcomer trait. When he lost consciousness, this trait automatically activated. His wounds were healed, the pain was wiped away for a while, and all his stats and skills were bumped up a level. That's the only reason Sunho could wipe out them all and survive. But the cooldown for this trait is 7 days. Right now, there's 6 days and 1 hour left. That means Sunho has been unconscious for 23 hours. He can't believe. He used Overcomer in the very first room. Good thing his left arm is still there. If Sunho hadn't recovered in time with that skill, that arm would have been torn off during the fight. After assessing his body, Sunho checks his quest progress. Number of Susans killed is 56 out of 60. Only 4 more to go to finish the quest. The points he got after the battle were 112. Each Susan is worth 2 points. Right now, Sunho has a total of 204 points. This amount hasn't even gotten him enough for a copper chest which costs 300 points. Only now does Sunho realize how valuable the tutorial quest rewards actually were. Putting the point issue aside, Sunho grabs his dagger and drags himself forward. He mutters to himself, "If it's only 4 left, I can do this." But the old folks were right, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Sunho hasn't even stepped into the next room when 2 Susans appear in front of him. He immediately gets into a combat stance, ready to fight at any second, but strangely, these 2 Susans don't. Just charge in head first, they hesitate. Could they be afraid because of their comrades' deaths? The answer is nope. They're waiting for orders from their leader. Sunho stands there, frozen at the sight. What's scarier than a Susan? A 2-headed Susan. Isn't this the double quest? Why is it showing up here? Sunho can't help but curse, "Damn it, admin! Are you messing with me?" Before Sunho can even regain his composure, the 2-headed monster, suddenly lunges at him. Luckily, Sunho is agile enough to dodge it by a hair, but because the monster has 2 heads, there's 0 delay between its 2 attacks. It immediately delivers a crushing blow from above, but thanks to his main character aura, Sunho barely keeps his life. After assessing the situation, Sunho determines this monster is at least E rank. He can't deal with it without the Overcomer trait. Sunho hasn't even had a chance to catch his breath before the monster. The 2-headed monster lunged at him with its blades, but Sunho's nimble movements helped him dodge once again. However, the monster next to him wasn't as lucky. It was run through by the blade on the spot. Seeing that its long-range attacks were failing, the 2-headed beast charged in for close-quarters combat, frantically trying to lop off Sunho's head. Sunho had no other choice but to make a run for the dungeon bed. If he did nothing, he'd die anyway, so he decided to stake everything on a gamble. In the nick of time, Sunho managed to reach the bed, but the monster grabbed his leg, hoisted him up into the air, and slammed him hard into the ground. But as the saying goes, the protagonist just won't die. Sunho's luck hit the jackpot. The dungeon chest he opened contained an escape scroll. In that life-or-death moment, he successfully used the scroll and was teleported out of the dungeon. Sunho thought he was a goner for sure, but he had made it out alive. He stared blankly at the dungeon gate, breathing heavily, his heart pounding out of his chest. Truly nothing is more of an adrenaline rush than poking the bear and running for it. Sunho covered his face and breathed a sigh of relief. Now he understood why the 8 saints were so obsessed with the system. But this was all just a taste of the horror to come. It forces people to struggle to give up hope until the end. Even more terrifying things are waiting ahead after calming down. Sunho checked his phone. While he was gone, there were 30 missed calls from Jonathan. He was incredibly worried after receiving a will from Sunho, but being unable to reach him. Sunho knew this, but he couldn't have cared less. He would call Jonathan back later. Truly, the wicked live long lives. The first person Sunho called after escaping the jaws of death was his homeroom teacher. As soon as she picked up, Sunho spoke, "I guess you're not going to the hospital. Are you Miss Yoonhee?" The teacher recognized Sunho instantly and was shocked. Following his instructions over the phone, Yoonhee immediately headed to the mountain where the dungeon was located. By then, Sunho had bandaged his wounds and was waiting at the gate. Seeing her student covered in injuries, Yoonhee was deeply worried. Sunho quickly reassured her and asked her to go inside to talk. But seeing the mental hospital sign, Yoonhee looked a bit scared. Seeing this, Sunho said, "Don't worry, there's nothing here, just the 2 of us." Damn, does this guy really know how to comfort someone? Yoonhee was trembling all over. She tried to explain that she wasn't crazy and didn't want to go to a mental hospital. Of course, Sunho knew that. If he had strong skills, she could have already read his mind. Clearly, she wasn't that strong yet. Sunho suddenly turned serious, his eyes glowing intensely, radiating a dangerous aura. Make a choice. You can go back to your normal life and live as a mental patient, or are you going to follow me? After entering Sunho, showed his teacher the beast inside his body the beast in his memories. Although Yoon-hee's powers hadn't developed yet, Sunho could still share his memories from a few days ago with her. Seeing the beast, Yoon-hee was terrified and kept screaming in a panic. Thankfully, Sunho was there to calm her down, but this seemed a bit too intense for a young woman. Yoon-hee was scared stiff, sitting in a corner hugging her knees. While Sunho didn't know what to do, next Yoon-hee spoke up, "So, you're saying we were chosen to fight those monsters and that they're going to attack us soon?" Yoon-hee's eyes were filled with despair. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Sunho looked toward the dungeon gate and said, "From the day it all began, I've always been preparing for that day. Beyond that passage, there are tons of monsters just like you saw." Then Sunho pulled out a contract and gave it to Yoon-hee. "If you decide to join me in challenging the dungeon, I will compensate you according to this contract. If not, please live your normal life, as if nothing happened until the day everything begins. Since not everyone will fight, please go back. I'll wait here until tomorrow. This is a life or death decision, so please think about it very carefully." Yoon-hee was stunned that these words were coming from a middle schooler. Ever since middle school, she could see the illusions of system windows. She had told her mother about it, but her mother just dragged her to a prayer house. One day, Yoon-hee began to experience other people's emotions. She tried to figure out if there was any connection, but failed miserably. And among them, there was one person she felt the strongest connection to, Sunho. Yoon-hee thought she might find clues from this kid. That was why she approached Sunho from a young age and tried to become his homeroom teacher. Returning to the present after driving away from the mental hospital, Yoon-hee stopped to carefully check the contract. The contract was truly insane. The signing fee was 200 million won, and the annual salary was 1 billion won. 500 million won would be given as an incentive for every dungeon raid and a performance bonus of 500 million won upon surviving. Death compensation was triple the annual salary, 3 billion won. These were astronomical figures that Yoon-hee never expected her student to offer in such an unimaginable contract. After deep consideration, she decided to drive back. Sunho was waiting at the gate. Looking into her hazy eyes, he already knew her answer. "Welcome to the other side of the world, Yoon-hee C, the awakened one." After signing the contract, Sunho got into the car and they headed back to the city. On the way, Yoon-hee was driving at an insane speed, only slightly slower than a cheetah. Sunho, sitting next to her, was a bit scared. He said to her, "If you're doing this because you feel obligated to me, it's unreasonable, but he didn't think that at all. "No, I'm grateful to you. Before you told me everything, all I could think about was how I should die. I have no reason to refuse. It's just a huge sum of money and accepting the reality that I'm not going back right." Although Yoon-hee tried to act tough, her hands didn't stop trembling. Deep down, she was still just a fragile young woman. Even though she was panicking, Yoon-hee confirmed with Sunho again, "But can you really give me such a huge amount of money? No matter what happens, the money matter must be fair." But Yoon-hee would never have expected that the kid before her was actually the top player on the Earth server. The money in the contract to him was nothing more than a mosquito. After returning, Sunho immediately went to the office. As soon as he saw him, Jonathan rushed over. "Sunho, you said you were fine. What's with all these bandages, huh?" Regardless, money matters must be settled fairly, but Yoon-hee would never guess that the boy before her is actually the top player on the server. The contract amount to him is nothing more than a mosquito bite. After returning, Sunho went straight to the office. The moment he saw him, Jonathan rushed over. "Sunho, you're safe, but what's with all these bandages? Just how badly are you hurt?" Sunho's wounds, which had just started to close, were almost ripped wide open from Jonathan. Shaking him like that, you could really see how worried he was. For the past few days, all Sunho had been worried about was whether someone like Jonathan was being followed by the paparazzi. "I'm truly speechless with this guy." Seeing the familiar-looking man in front of him, Yoon-hee asked, "Are you the investor, Jonathan?" Sunho, confident, introduced him. "Go ahead and greet him. He's the one who will carry out our contract. The choice of the fox, one of the world's top 20 billionaires, the god of the investment world, the hunter Jonathan, you don't have anything left to worry about. Right, Yun-hee? He left after receiving 200 million. At this moment, she still couldn't believe this was real. Jonathan then asked, "Hey, Sun-hoo, why did you give that girl so much money? If we both disappear, giving her 3 billion, are you crazy?" But it wasn't the right time yet. Sun-hoo would tell Jonathan everything in the near future. The important thing right now was to go eat. Sun-hoo hadn't had a good meal in days. At the table, while eating, the two couldn't help. But talk about the current state of the global economy. Not only South Korea, but international capital flowing into Asia had shifted toward Eastern Europe or Latin America and finally Russia. Upon hearing this, Jonathan immediately went to look into the information. He couldn't believe the things Sun-hoo said. No way! How many nuclear weapons does Russia have? That country can't just be destroyed. That's what everyone thought, but Sun-hoo's next target was exactly that place. Sun-hoo looked at Jonathan and asked, "You asked how great JIRA is, right?" "Correct. Compete with Russia. Whoever grows faster will gain the advantage." After that, Sun-hoo introduced a friend to Jonathan Ryan, whose Korean name was Kim Jong-soo. "Look at him. And he's not doing so well right now, but please take care of him." Jonathan looked at the photo on his computer and smiled happily. "So my job is to track him down. Finally, I get to rest after such a long time." But life isn't a fairy tale. There's no way Jonathan would get to rest like that. Whenever Sun-hoo brought up making money, he would turn into a different person. His next words made Jonathan's skin crawl. "What are you talking about? We have to increase our stake. There's going to be a Russian government bond sale event. We're going to pull off something huge. About $1 billion maybe." Immediately after that, Jonathan boarded a flight to Russia to start the plan. In his mind, he recalled the past. Russia was in crisis, knowing it was on the verge of collapse, yet daring to pour in $1 billion. Here we go again. Elsewhere, Sun-hoo's wounds began to heal while the economic knights started to act. As the knights prepared to enter the dungeon, the training for Yun-hee officially began. Yun-hee held the knife in her hand, trembling. Even though she was ordered to, she still didn't dare to attack Sun-hoo. Seeing that Sun-hoo stepped closer, pressing the knife against his own stomach, radiating an invisible killing intent before speaking, "If we were in a dungeon, you would have already died 10 times over. That's the first part of the contract. Orders related to the dungeon are absolute. Of course, that includes training related to the dungeon. Did you forget?" Yun-hee couldn't quite handle this killing intent. She looked like she was about to faint. The abilities Yun-hee displayed were all mediocre. Her attribute ranking couldn't even be classified as a hunter. But there was one skill that caught Sun-hoo's interest: Mary's hand. It recovers the combat incapable status of a touched target. Current level F. Cooldown time 24 hours. Sun-hoo had never heard of this skill before, so he had to test it out. A skill that makes the wounds of the target touched recover faster. Yun-hee was stabbing with her knife, and the target of this stab would recover while she would have to bear that injury herself. This skill was no different from turning Yun-hee into a sacrificial doll. Could a weak girl like her handle it? But there was no more time left. If they hesitated, they would both die in the dungeon. Sun-hoo grabbed Yun-hee's hand and shouted, "This is the last time Yun-hee stabbed me." Yun-hee gathered all her courage, screamed, and thrust the knife forward. After enemy attacks until danger from excessive blood loss occurs, Mary's hand is used. At that moment, her touch makes you forget the feeling of pain and heals the wound but doesn't remove it completely. In that state, Sun-hoo can continue to fight immediately with partially recovered stamina, but the pain Yun-hee has to bear is unimaginable. To use that skill on that small body, she has to endure 3 times the pain. This is a skill that cannot be used casually unless it's a critical situation. Standing before Yun-hee's hospital bed, witnessing the little girl writhing in pain, Sun-hoo felt a bit hesitant. Will she be able to do it? Mary's hand, can she do it in a dungeon without hesitation? After being unconscious for 12 hours, Yun-hee finally woke up. During this time, Sun-hoo was always on standby, by her side monitoring her condition. After waking up, Yun-hee felt that what had just happened was simpler than she thought, but Sun-hoo didn't think so. He carefully advised Yun-hee to be careful with her wounds for the next few days, then changed clothes to prepare to go out. The place Sun Ho went to was the Jordan investment firm where his father worked. Sun Ho's father, while walking with a colleague, ran into Sun Ho, waiting for him. He immediately introduced his son to his colleague. Upon finding out that Sun Ho was only in middle school, the colleague was quite surprised. He didn't expect that children nowadays would grow up so fast. After that, Sun Ho was given some pocket money by him to encourage him. But in his wildest dreams, he could never imagine that he was giving money to his own boss. The image of a boss being given money by a subordinate is truly funny. On the way back home, Sun Ho's father revealed the reason he called him there today. It turned out he had been promoted twice in a row and wanted him to keep it a secret from his mother as a surprise gift. The father pointed toward the bank where he worked and confidently boasted to his son, but it turned out everything had been arranged by Sun Ho beforehand. All along. It's true that having a capable son brings blessings. At this moment, that fateful day finally arrived, the day Sun Ho received the savings book from his father. The father handed his son a bank book and said, "Think about which stocks we should buy. With that money, tell your dad and let's talk about it more," Sun Ho said, clutching the notebook, deeply moved. Sun Ho had officially entered the world of finance. With this bank account, he had survived and experienced so much in the financial district. This account was the first step of the butterfly effect. Sun Ho held the notebook tight. Now he was ready to enter the dungeon once more. Returning to Yeon-hee's training after a while, Yeon-hee could now aim and use the crossbow accurately. Although Sun Ho wasn't even sure if she could deal any damage with that thing, there was no other choice. She definitely wouldn't be doing any melee combat. All right. After thinking it over, Sun Ho decided they would both enter the dungeon tomorrow. When Yeon-hee heard this, she stood there stunned. Once she came to her senses, she asked if she needed to prepare anything else. Sun Ho, face stone cold, replied, "If there's anything so essential that I have to remind you, it would be preparing your will." In reality, there was a high chance that Yeon-hee wouldn't make it back. After entering the dungeon again, Sun Ho entered a berserk state, slaughtering everything in his path. This time, he was better prepared, so the battle was completely one-sided. Watching this scene, Yeon-hee realized just how shallow her imagination of the dungeon had been. Her worldview collapsed. In the dungeon, people survived only to destroy other living beings. There was no difference between the monsters and humanity. This place alone, it was a war for survivors. Although she didn't engage in direct combat, Yeon-hee still performed her support duties well. Sun Ho's wounds, they were slightly healed. After the intense battle, Sun Ho stepped out from the pile of corpses drenched in blood and approached Yeon-hee. "Well done. You didn't lose your mind while doing..." things like this. After completing the mission, the reward they received was an escape talisman. Even though she knew this could be her lifeline, Yeon-hee didn't object when Sun Ho kept it. This girl's willpower seemed stronger than Sun Ho had expected. Just as predicted, having a healer made combat much more effective. If Sun Ho had acted alone, he might have had to endure wounds with just painkillers. While he could endure it to some extent, it would still affect his combat ability. Sun Ho never expected that one day he would have an inhabitant of the spirit world as a companion. The only ones who escaped were two villains from the spirit world power users who could unleash intangible attacks at any time and in any form they wanted. Sun Ho didn't even know what that guy could do. Just then, a system notification appeared. Yeon-hee has used healing. The obsession. Sun Ho finally snapped out of it. He looked up to see Yeon-hee trembling, pointing her crossbow at him. Sun Ho then reassured her, "I understand. That's how we'll do it. Ha, I knew it. The spirit world has made me more sensitive. I'm still fine just thinking about the past a little." Hearing that, Yeon-hee calmed down, but she was still a bit worried, so she suggested waiting a while longer for Sun Ho to regain his composure before leaving. Sun Ho wiped the blood off his face and encouraged her, "No, you're doing great. Whatever I taught you, don't hesitate. If you feel anything suspicious, even the smallest thing, we'll head to the second room." As usual, Sun Ho checked the room first. Then he went inside. With just a glance, Sun Ho hurriedly warned Yeon-hee, "Don't forget what I told you. The instructions I gave you about if we encounter the monster, that two-headed one." Once again, Sun Ho encountered the monster that had almost killed him before. Just like last time, Sun Ho had absolutely no chance to fight back and could only passively take the hits. After being slashed across the chest, Sunho was kicked by the monster into the wall. Yeonhee saw this and was terrified, but she remembered Sunho's instructions from before. Don't use healing or Mary's hand. You cannot provoke it with your clumsy crossbow. I have a final strategy. You only need to do one thing if anything approaches you. If you want to live, you must run. While Sunho was busy dealing with the two-headed monster, two of the minions, the Suzannes, targeted Yeonhee. Following Sunho's orders, Yeonhee immediately ran for it. Her heart, at that moment, felt like it was about to explode. Yeonhee's stamina was truly pathetic, but she couldn't use Mary's hand yet. Yeonhee felt helpless, not knowing what to do to survive. What must she do to have the stamina to run? Just then, a system notification appeared. You have completed the one-on-one combat challenge. Please decide on first and second place based on mutual agreement. Yeonhee saw this notification and wept with joy. Finally, Sunho had successfully defeated the two-headed monster, but danger was looming behind her. The Suzannes still didn't stop and were preparing to attack her. At that moment, Sunho threw a pile of blood, drawing the attention of the two Suzannes. His whole body was bathed in blood, surrounded by the lightning of the skill, Odin's wrath. In Sunho's hand was the head of the two-headed monster. He glared at the two Suzannes with bloodthirsty eyes and taunted them. That's right over here, you dogs. The thirst for blood that drives you crazy is right here. In front of Sunho, a system notification appeared similar to Yeonhee's. Sunho knew his teammate was still alive, so he breathed a sigh of relief. The duration of the one who overcomes all difficulties had only 10 seconds left, but that was more than enough to deal with these two pests. Then, with just a few slashes, the two Suzannes were cut into hundreds of pieces instantly. But Sunho then reached his limit and passed out. When he opened his eyes in terrible pain, suddenly the image of the first villain appeared. Surely that guy had experienced this agonizing pain like dying and coming back to life many times. The Sunho of the past used to be jealous of this attribute of his, but he never anticipated such intense pain. Fortunately, thanks to Yeonhee's healing skills, Sunho was able to recover, as so quickly. Looking at Yeonhee, who was covered in injuries, Sunho remembered the scene of the battle earlier. Sunho thought he survived because of the trap he had set beforehand, but that wasn't it. Yeonhee had used her arrows to pierce the monster's eyes, making the creature pursuing her panic, and then waited for the right moment to use her dagger. Thanks to that, Sunho was able to easily finish off the last two monsters. Sunho had thought Yeonhee wouldn't be of any help, but he was wrong. A healer just starting out, not even F rank yet, but her eyes had completely changed, truly looking forward to the moment she survives this grueling trial. In the last week, both of them searched through every box in the dungeon. The goal of the first challenge was to attack everything, defeat all the bosses, to clear the entire dungeon. To do that, Sunho needed to get all the item boxes in the dungeon. Sunho had upgraded his skills and prepared for the battle with the boss. Of course, sometimes the boxes in the dungeon contained curses, but luckily Yeonhee was there in time to use her healing spell to free Sunho from the fear. Every time Yeonhee dispelled a curse, Sunho couldn't help but think of, the great villain knew that to break a curse, one must first possess the ability to cast it. Having someone by his side who could infiltrate his mind at any moment made Sunho uneasy. Yeonhee didn't feel comfortable either. After achieving all their objectives, Sunho and Yeonhee headed straight for the boss room. This was the final chamber of the dungeon. Behind the door wall was the dungeon boss, a dungeon that required at least 5 A-rank hunters to clear. Sunho couldn't believe they had made it this far alone. 1 F-rank hunter and 1 person who wasn't even F-rank. Before entering the boss room, Sunho turned to encourage Yeonhee. If things went according to plan, it wouldn't take long. We've survived this long, so let's not die here. After taking a moment to steady themselves, they both decided to enter the boss room. Inside was an entire army of Susan. Leading them was the boss, the Susan 0175 teacher theory. The boss was entirely white and massive, completely different from the others. It didn't even care about the intruders. To it, Sunho and Yeonhee were weaker than mosquitoes, not worth its time. The first time Sunho came here, some guys had mocked the sight of these Susans, but then they realized the more you kill, the stronger the Susan horde becomes. By the time they realized that it was too late, the boss had already farmed up to 1,000 stacks. At that point, no one could stop it. That's why the moment he met the boss, Sunho activated every skill he had. You have activated Odin's Wrath, target self. You have used the Speed Boost skill. You have activated Armor. The crux of the strategy was to avoid head-on combat with the Susans as much as possible. A Susan with 0 stacks is a complete loser. Sunho's eyes glowed, his body surrounded by lightning. He let out a yell and charged straight at the boss. But it looked like Sunho miscalculated the angle and didn't quite make it. He ended up landing on the snout of a nearby Susan. Seeing this, the boss sneered in contempt. This mud is getting a bit cocky. Just then a Susan lunged and bit onto Sunho's left arm. Sunho punched it in the snout, sending it off to meet its ancestors. As expected even, though it was buffed by the F-rank Iron Fist skill, Sunho still couldn't block the Susan's jaws. The F-rank Iron Fist provides solid power to any body part that is chosen. Sunho had no choice but to tear through every monster blocking his path to reach the boss. Thankfully, Yeonhee was there to heal him, so Sunho didn't have to worry and just kept pushing forward. Yeonhee was using her recovery skill while trying to hide her presence with a mysterious item. Even though it was a low-tier F-rank item, it could still hide her presence from monsters obsessed with bloodlust. Witnessing Sunho recklessly charging forward, ignoring all his injuries, made Yeonhee tear up. Sunho had to break through this wall of monsters before they noticed Yeonhee behind him. That was the only way for both of them to survive and clear this dungeon. But it felt like Sunho was just punching a wall. No matter how much strength he used, he couldn't budge it. Just when Sunho let his guard down for a split second, a Susan delivered a thunderous blow to his head. Sunho immediately lost consciousness. At that moment, the Overcomer trait automatically activated. Physical strength and sensory perception increased from rank F to E. Muscle strength and speed increased from E to D. His wounds began to heal and the pain was temporarily erased. The duration 5 minutes. With the points from the dungeon, Sunho had greatly increased his stats. Now the real fight began. Nothing could stop Sunho after activating Overcomer. The wall of monsters that seemed impenetrable before was now as thin as paper. The Overcomer effect only had 42 seconds left. Sunho had eliminated all the monsters blocking his path and finally faced the boss. The boss, feeling the danger, immediately stood up and fired a blast from its palm. But with D-rank speed, Sunho dodged it by a hair, though his carotid artery was still grazed. He pulled out his knife and hurled it straight at the boss. The boss couldn't dodge in time and the knife pierced its chest. Before it could even scream, Sunho leapt up and stomped hard on the ground. The Overcomer effect was now down to its final seconds. Right at that moment, Sunho shouted, "Yeonhee Mary's hand!" It was immediately activated. Sunho recovered a bit of stamina and instantly used the knife to decapitate the boss. The Overcomer trait effect ended right on time, but Sunho's injuries were transferred to Yeonhee, tripled in damage. Her location was now fully exposed to the remaining Susans. Sunho rushed toward Yeonhee, who was lying motionless on the ground. At that moment, the mission complete notification appeared. Even though she wasn't fully conscious, Yeonhee managed to tell Sunho to prioritize the first reward. A moment ago, Sunho had been grazed by the boss's attack, hitting his artery. Now the wound was transferred to Yeonhee, leading to excessive blood loss, but they still weren't safe yet. To get out alive, Sunho had to eliminate all the remaining monsters. He gripped the dagger in his hand, his body filled with bloodthirst. After a fierce battle, Sunho used his remaining strength to carry Yeonhee out. He couldn't even remember how he had killed the rest of the monsters by the time they left the dungeon. Both of them looked battered. Yeonhee had survived thanks to receiving the recovery trait from the second reward, a fantastic trait that sustains life at a minimum in cases of fatal wounds. However, the pain couldn't be lessened. The person with that trait needs time to recover. What Sunho received was the Devi's Sword. It was a pretty good sword with an added effect on every strike. This was the first sword Sunho had obtained. Devi's Sword has a skill that can inflict sharp wounds that make it hard for enemies to move normally. It's a cheat-like attribute that even high-level awakened hunters would crave. Sunho was overwhelmed with thrill, thinking that everything was going exactly according to his initial calculations. And the results of the financial empire were truly staggering. Both teams, Jonathan Kim Jong-soo and Julian Jessica, had achieved massive victories. Jonathan happily called to share the good news. Sun-ho had calculated everything perfectly, a 450% profit totaling $90 billion. We did it. But 450% still wasn't the highest. Julian's side had even more profit. And Jessica, it's up to 615%. That was a number beyond imagination. When Yeon-hee woke up, Sun-ho handed her a file. It was the medical group's full report. Since the dungeon was destroyed, the area can now be used as a fully functional hospital. Next is the payment as per the contract, 500 million yen for and entering the dungeon, 500 million for surviving, and 1 billion as an annual income. A total of 2 billion. Yeon-hee looked at the bank book in her hand, unable to hold back her emotions. She was shaking, unable to believe it was real. Yeon-hee used to do charity work on a very low income. It was probably very difficult for someone as sensitive as her. But from now on, with the medical group, she can comfortably help many more people. Yeon-hee smiled, looking a bit dazed in the hospital bed, never having seen that much money before. Just then, Sun-ho spoke up. Have you changed your mind about entering the dungeon? Yeon-hee was stunned for a moment, then after thinking carefully, she wore a smile. A bright one then replied, Sun-ho, regarding that decision, I guess I'll need a lot of money, so please guide me well in the future, Captain Sun-ho. He seemed very satisfied with this answer. Now he had a teammate to conquer the first dungeon. The next day at a luxury hotel, Sun-ho was preparing to welcome an important employee from New York, Jessica. She was the one who worked with Julian and brought Sun-ho a massive profit not long ago. After greeting her, Sun-ho immediately handed Jessica a file. This is an investment proposal from the leadership, a project from Russia. It's up to you now, Jessica. Jessica hesitated for a moment. Julian, my boss, thinks very highly of me, Eden. I need to ask his opinion on this. Seeing that Sun-ho said, feel free, no need to rush. But why? Don't you try listening to me for once? Selling the majority of primary stocks on the NASDAQ market in New York, Jessica was worried, but she would accept it soon. $30 billion is worth investing in a sudden decision with no accountability for losses. Sun-ho was pretending to be lenient but was still watching Julian's moves. Something very interesting is about to happen. There's one more person, Jonathan, who is monitoring Kim Jong-soo's actions. He is also doing his job well. Jonathan is currently conducting a transaction regarding new technology with a young startup named Mark. Mark holds a file in his hand intending to introduce a search technology called PageRank. But Jonathan had already researched this, so he took the initiative. That's a technique used to evaluate the importance of a website, right? Depending on the level of user trust, I heard it's worth $1 million. Mark was slightly shaken by that number. $1 million. He imagined his technology could be sold for $1 million. With that much money, he could pursue a PhD project or perfect it slowly. But that technology was not allowed to be sold outright like that. This startup has 2 people, and they have had to run the company themselves while it's on the rise. This is the best opportunity. It's not easy to share safely, even after the initial public offering. This term refers to the first time a company issues stock and lists it on the stock exchange to raise capital from investors. But if Jonathan buys this technology outright, those 2 will return to their PhD program. Jonathan is the only one who can resolve this dilemma. Without another word, Jonathan had directly pulled out a check worth $10 million and placed it on the table. Mark held the check in his hand, his whole body trembling. He couldn't believe his eyes anymore, so many zeros on a single check. Mark swallowed hard, then asked Jonathan for permission to discuss it with his partner. Jonathan looked at his watch and gave him 10 minutes, only 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, Mark returned. With his answer, Mr. Jonathan, we sincerely thank you for your kindness and for valuing our technology, but no. Before the other party could finish, Jonathan pulled out another check. Mark immediately went silent. Inside, he was overjoyed, but he still held his ground. Jonathan saw this and said, do you know why I am so successful if you have read my book? You must know that I have bet my entire fortune twice. It is not gambling or relying on luck. I seized the last opportunity. All my calculations, they have been perfectly accurate. And today I have seen the third opportunity. Can you imagine the price I am willing to bet our liquidity fund is currently over $500 billion spread across the US, Canada, and Japan, and that number is still growing. Hearing this astronomical figure, Mark was terrified. He had never even dared to imagine that amount of money. Jonathan then pointed to the 2 checks on the table and continued, "All right, back to the main point. If people truly crave something, they will never let their intentions show. But I don't do that. Do you really not want to change your mind?" Mark, after hearing this, still didn't understand what Jonathan meant, wearing a blank expression. Jonathan nonchalantly said, "From the beginning, your goal was simply to sell your technology until you met me. But now, what about it? Do you truly believe you can generate more profit than the price I offered? If that's really the case, I won't stop you." At this moment, Jonathan picked up the phone to call his assistant and gave instructions to cancel the meeting with the treasurer because he had an urgent matter to handle. Mark felt the threat in every word. He was shivering with fear. Standing before the king of investors, he was nothing. Sensing the other's psychology, Jonathan touched the 2 checks and leaned closer to Mark, saying, "I will do my best for your benefit. So let me make it clear that this is not the end. You will have no other choice but to come back and see me." Mark was scared, his whole body breaking into a cold sweat. He didn't expect Jonathan to go this far for a piece of technology from a company. After giving it some serious thought, Mark gripped the 2 checks tightly in his hands. He gave his final answer 50-50. "But if you really want this technology, our side needs executive control. That's the bare minimum." Jonathan gave a small smile, instantly breaking the tension. This was exactly the answer he had been hoping for. "My sincere apologies. They say fate follows its own path. My name literally means 10 to the power of 100 Google. I always try to live up to it." Once the deal was struck, Mark left smiling at Jonathan's friendly demeanor. But the moment the door clicked shut, Jonathan's expression darkened. Sanhu stepped out from the back room, applauding. "Well done, Jonathan. You really are a quick learner." Jonathan just shook his head slightly. Just a moment ago, he really intended to withdraw that $20 million. I wonder if Jonathan thinks $20 million is too much for a company. That was just established. Attracting shareholders at such a low valuation isn't a good look. But this is a company that will grow into a $60 billion titan in 10 years. Everything happens for a reason. Just then, Sunho received a message. "I found the cat." Sunho's gaze suddenly turned dangerous. This is the biggest reason for his regression. John Clark, a former mercenary, joined the gun district in hopes of meeting a big shot. He'd rather be shot dead on the battlefield than waste his life doing the same repetitive tasks for a paycheck. However, when John grew bored with the life of a private investigator, a man named Ethan came to meet him. That was none other than Sunho, under a false identity. From Sunho, John could smell the scent of someone who had walked the line between life and death. He believed this young man was connected to some powerful figure somewhere, so he tried his best to earn his trust. But John couldn't fulfill the client's request under corporate rules, so he proposed an off-the-books service. Sunho gave a mysterious smile. John had succeeded in getting what he wanted, a connection to a big shot. In a large black SUV, a group of mercenaries, equipped to the teeth, were checking their gear. Everyone was masked to hide their identities. Their employer, Sunho, was also in the car. He was sitting lost in thought, focusing on his target, the first villain. Right now, the guy is in a detention center, so they can't use conventional methods. He was charged with first-degree murder, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Sunho was certain this was the man he was looking for. After a while, the car reached the target location. Sunho would be joining the operation. This time around. First-degree murder at the age of 13? He must have been a psychopath long before that, so there's no need for mercy. The team communicated via walkie-talkies. Ambush the building except for the lookout. If the cat tries to escape, shoot on sight. Once the plan was clear, Sunho formed a 3-man team with John and T-Boy to move inside before the operation began. Sunho carefully reminded them, remember, don't underestimate him just because he's young. If you think about the bounty for success, you'll know how dangerous he really is. The reward for this mission reached $1 billion. John didn't know what to say about these rich guys anymore. Spending $1 billion just to kill a 13-year-old kid. You really shouldn't teach a wealthy how to spend their money. Thanks to the bug, the lookout spotted the target in the bathroom and alerted the team. Sunho led the group quickly, advancing to the door of the target room. Despite the urgency, he didn't act rashly but calmly assessed the situation. Suddenly the door opened and inside stood a blond youth with a sturdy build. It was the mission target Bobby. John and T-Boy hadn't even reacted before they took a strike to the neck, leaving them unable to breathe. It was a good thing Sun Ho joined the mission himself. Only an awakened can defeat another awakened. Moreover, the opponent is also a regressor like Sun Ho, so they couldn't let their guard down. Sun Ho didn't hesitate to open fire. The other two, once they recovered, also kept firing at the target, but it seemed like an invisible shield was absorbing the damage around Bobby. This shield blocked every bullet heading toward him, while his teammates provided cover fire. Sun Ho decided to use his awakened powers. Sun Ho focused his energy in his palm, activating Devi's sword. A sharp purple sword aura pierced through Bobby's shield, sending him flying into the wall. Not giving his opponent a chance to react, Sun Ho used Odin's wrath on his dagger and charged. At the same time, he activated Goom on Bobby, but the skill activation failed. Sun Ho's attack was also blocked by the shield. This is the first villain all right tough to kill. Bobby immediately pulled out a switchblade to counterattack. This knife had been painted red to increase damage, so it couldn't be taken lightly. Fortunately, Sun Ho dodged it thanks to his superior stats, then retaliated with a punch. 1 punch, he's staggered. 2 punches, he's reeling. 3 punches, he's dazed. 4 punches, he's out for the count. Bobby's invisible shield was beaten like a drum. He couldn't fight back. John and T-Boy stood by, witnessing the battle, speechless. This wasn't a fight for normal people anymore. After a good beating, Bobby lost consciousness, but now everything was just beginning. Just like Sun Ho, he regressed while it's still in the womb, so he also received the Overcomer of All Hardships trait. Upon activating the trait, his stats spiked, and he blocked Sun Ho's punch. Bobby's eyes blazed, his whole body exuding a murderous aura as if he wanted to devour his prey. Sun Ho, caught by surprise, couldn't dodge the opponent's headbutt and was knocked far away. Seeing this, John immediately fired at the target, but suddenly Bobby disappeared into thin air without a trace. While everyone was stunned, Sun Ho shouted, 20-meter radius, he's still nearby, split up. 1 to the roof, 1 to the basement, I'll check the street. Move fast. If that guy escapes this time, the world will suffer terrible consequences. John and T-Boy received the order and immediately acted. Sun Ho also intended to stand up and chase him, but suddenly felt dizzy. He didn't know when. He had been stabbed in the stomach by Bobby's knife. Having lost too much blood, Sun Ho gradually lost consciousness. Luckily, the Overcomer of All Hardships trait was activated. Sun Ho gritted his teeth, pulled out the knife, and began searching for Bobby. But even with enhanced senses, Sun Ho still couldn't detect him. And when the effect of Overcomer of All Hardships gradually wore off, he lost consciousness. The next day, at the mercenary headquarters, Sun Ho went to check the situation as the boss. The mercenaries saw his face and immediately looked away. That was understandable, even the veteran soldiers couldn't hide their anxiety and nervousness because of what they had witnessed yesterday. It was a world of violence completely different from the usual. Today, Sun Ho came to inspect the body of the team, that member who died in yesterday's hunt. Looking at the condition of the body, it seemed to be a poison-related skill. If that poison could make Sun Ho pass out, then this person's insides must have been completely corroded. That was truly a painful death. After asking for the deceased's name, Sun Ho spoke up. When everything is over, I will create an insurance fund for the employees. For now, let's focus on catching that bastard. We'll discuss the next steps later. But John, after witnessing the battle, yesterday felt a bit hesitant. How are we? I'm supposed to catch an old fox like that. Do we even have the ability to catch him? Sun Ho looked serious. The longer we wait, the stronger he gets. If we miss this chance, not even a massive military force will be able to stand against him. So we must act now before that becomes a reality. John heard these words and realized the seriousness of the issue. This was no longer something to be taken lightly. John reported that there were things Bobby did to Sun Ho. The victim was a 28-year-old male he met online. Since they couldn't find the murder weapon, he was released due to lack of evidence. Now I see why Bobby's growth rate is so high. He's definitely hunting for potential awakeners. Sun Ho immediately contacts Jonathan. Jonathan, How many shares of gold online do we have left? The messaging app used is called Goon, a service provided by Goon Online. Because of the benefits of investigating crime, related to Goon and being a shareholder, Sunho was able to access the server logs. Bobby approached potential awakeners by naming the chat rooms something like, "Anyone with at least F rank power is welcome." After obtaining the members' information from the chat, Sunho gives it to John. The task for the current mercenary team is to monitor everyone on the list. Sunho carefully instructs them, just observe them. There's a good chance our target will try to approach them. Make sure to bring at least one team along. We need to be fully prepared. John listens without any questions about the mission. Content. What he cares about right now is the pay for this job. But everything has already been calculated by Sunho beforehand. He approaches and opens the container in front of them. John witnesses this sight and his jaw drops in shock. An entire container filled with cash is right before his eyes. This must be worth tens of billions of dollars. It's only now that John realizes his boss isn't just some run-of-the-mill rich kid. After handing everything over, Sunho boards a plane back to South Korea. On the way, he scrolls through the world's wealth management rankings for 1998. As expected, the Jonathan Investment Fund is at the top with $509 billion in pension funds. It has influenced politics all across America. The assets of many of the world's billionaires are concentrating into New York corporations, and the bank behind the scenes controlling the global economy is about to be revealed. It won't be long now. As soon as the flight lands in Korea, Iona is there to welcome Sunho. She decided to exchange all the points she earned from clearing the previous dungeon for 2 bronze treasure chests. She waited for Sunho so they could open them together. Iona did this because she wanted to get some advice from Sunho. On the way back to the office, Iona couldn't hide her excitement and kept asking Sunho questions. Once they reached the office, Iona immediately opened the first chest. Even though she only got some recovery items, she was so happy she started jumping and singing. What a naive kid so inexperienced with the world. For a veteran like Sunho, no item in a bronze chest could surprise him, but the item in the second chest made Sunho's eyes widen in shock. It was an item called Clown's Dagger. When attacking it, has a small chance to inflict a paralysis effect on enemies rank F. Iona didn't know anything and asked Sunho if this thing was any good. Looking at Sunho's expression, you could tell right away that this thing was more than just good. This item is exactly like one of the 3 one-of-a-kind weapons from his past life. The 3 one-of-a-kind weapons are the only items that can be upgraded to S rank. In his past life, it was owned by someone extremely dangerous. Even though Sunho knew he was someone who would never stop until he achieved his goal, he didn't think he would be crazy enough to upgrade an F rank item to S rank. If the upgrade fails, the item is completely destroyed. Unexpectedly, Iona's newbie luck brought such an unexpected joy. That evening, Director Park of Jellin Company had a meeting with the chairman of the Dion Group at a luxury restaurant. The chairman of Dion Group, after a few drinks, stated the main purpose of the meeting. He wanted to use 100 billion won to buy back shares of Jellin Group. Director Park, upon hearing this, finished the drink in his hand and stood up to leave, citing an urgent meeting. This was the most correct decision at that moment. Playing tricks behind Sunho's back is never a good idea. Director Park later received a call informing him that the meeting had been postponed until tomorrow morning. Although confused because he had just been summoned urgently a few hours earlier, he still remained calm. After hanging up, Director Park thought about the woman who had turned down the Blue House's invitation. Because of the meeting, he wondered how she was doing now. She is currently sweating bullets standing next to Sunho. The whole room is filled with sharp, cold weapons, making Jenny a little scared. Sunho sees this and reassures her that they are just collectibles, then talks about business. The domestic media is staring at Jenny, so I called you back to ask about this. How are the group's investment activities going? Jenny flashed a mysterious smile and replied, I have some good news for you. We have acquired the majority of the chain shares of the top 10 companies amidst the national chaos. The corporations have set up slush funds and reorganized their governance structures. For example, the equity structure starts from Usun Group, Usun Dreamland, to Usun Insurance, then to Usun Electronics. And from Usun Packaging, it cycles back to Usun Dreamland. In this way, with just the shares in Usun Dreamland, the Usun Group can control the entire operations of the corporation. It's similar with Dion Elevators of Dion Group and Hansu Confectionery of Hansu Group. They play a key role in a chain management process, so they are called chain shares. This is great news for our investors. This country is about to belong to Jilin. Now entering the middle of summer history will change bit by bit. But natural disasters happen when they happen. The day Typhoon Oga hit the Korean peninsula, even the storm Taipei couldn't cool down the heat of the stock market. It will rise with the tech boom in New York. The trend started when Russia invested $10 billion into Jilin after the financial war. Dion stocks quickly launched Korea Fund Purchase Rights products, and then the Korea Super Tech 21 policy was applied. But on the day the Bank of Korea matured its IMF debt was when Sunho had to make a decision. He wanted to finish high school normally, but that seemed impossible because Sunho could no longer delay. He would talk to reassure his parents. That evening, Sunho showed his father an email stating that his reports on major companies had been noticed by the Jonathan Financial Group, and he had been chosen as an analyst for the Jonathan Financial Investment Group. Jonan stared at the words in front of him, his jaw dropping in shock. Besides genius, what other word could describe it? The achievements of a third-year high school student far exceeded his parents' expectations. Sunho closed his eyes, trying to guess what his father was thinking. This time he looked even more tense than when he entered his first dungeon. Leonin saw this and asked, "My son, why do you look like you're about to die?" Sunho immediately bowed to apologize. His father placed his hand on his shoulder, tearing up. Why? Why are you apologizing? Why didn't I realize my child was so special? Lift your head up, kid. I'm just sad because I wasn't by your side at the most important moments of your life, that's all. But it's good that I know what you're like now. After wiping away his tears, Ronan hugged his son. You've grown up. You don't need to worry about your old man anymore. Work with those big investors, just do whatever you want. That's all I can say. I'm sorry, son. I should have supported you more. Sunho listened. Hearing this, I welled up with tears and hugged my father tightly. I was so grateful. After talking to Dad, Sunho knew he still had to convince his mother. She handed him a childhood photo and said, Taekwondo was your only passion back then. If you remember, you were so excited to represent the country. For the competition, I assume you must have trained very hard, so I hope you can achieve whatever it is you want. It seemed things were easier than Sunho had thought, or perhaps he had just worried too much. Either way, no matter what, his parents would always be behind him, supporting him. The next day, as soon as he met Yoon-hee, she could tell Sunho was happy about something, and he immediately became wary. Upon hearing those words, only when Yoon-hee hurriedly explained she hadn't used her skills did the atmosphere finally calm down. Today, Sunho came to ask about the progress of finding potential adventurers. It turns out adventurers aren't that hard to find. On a pouring rainy day in a dense forest, Sunho and Yoon-hee were tracking an awakened. After searching for a while, they spotted a glowing dungeon portal in the distance. Seeing this, Sunho was extremely surprised. This dungeon showed no signs of being open yesterday, which proves an awakened is currently challenging it. That is exactly why Sunho didn't sit on his butt for 3 years at school. Traces of the awakened were everywhere, not just here. Yoon-hee immediately drew her dagger and took a defensive stance. Her eyes glowed completely different from her usual innocent look. Sunho was surprised. He had never taught her to be wary of other pre-awakened individuals. Just as he expected, she had enough sense to realize it. Because it was raining, it would be hard to track them if the awakened finished the dungeon and left. That was why Sunho signaled Yoon-hee to stop and observe the situation. After a long wait, Sunho was a bit worried about Yoon-hee's hypothermia. They really shouldn't have brought raincoats. Not wearing them would have kept their senses sharper. Just then, Yoon-hee noticed something unusual. The light from the dungeon portal suddenly dimmed and then vanished. Sunho signaled for Yoon-hee to stay put while he stepped forward to scout. Suddenly, a system notification appeared. A dungeon has appeared. Do you want to enter? The fact that the dungeon had been sealed meant the first person to enter must have died. After confirming the situation, Yoon-hee breathed a sigh of relief. Sunho then approached and praised her. Well done. You were right to be cautious. If you keep being this careful, you'll live a long life. It wasn't strictly necessary since both had escape tickets, but you never know what kind of monster is inside. You can't get comfortable too soon. After successfully forming a party, Sun-ho and Yoon-hee decided to conquer this dungeon. As soon as they entered, countless notifications appeared. You have entered the dungeon. Warning, you must complete the mission before escaping. Death Zone mission activated. The Duke's Decay mission activated. Hibernation mission activated. Hearing the mention of a Duke, Sun-ho was immediately on guard. He turned to ask Yoon-hee if she was afraid of centipedes. Yoon-hee bravely claimed she wasn't scared, but her body was honest. She was trembling all over and her legs felt like jelly, unable to move. Just then, rocks from the ceiling suddenly fell. Both looked up to see a giant green centipede crawling above them. The centipede attacked immediately. Fortunately, Sun-ho reacted quickly and gently pulled Yoon-hee away, then used his dagger to block the tentacle attack. At that moment, the two got a clear look at the monster. This was the dungeon duke mentioned in the mission, a supergiant centipede with countless poisonous tentacles, Sun-ho, and spoke up, reminding her, "Get ready, we've just met the worst kind of monster. Among monsters, some act just like humans. Even though they look intimidating, if you understand the following, you can kill a noble centipede very easily. Destroying the antennae will render it helpless. Decapitate it by slashing the joints. And watch out for the venom glands in its legs. That's the theory. Enough talk time for practice." With just a few quick slashes, Sun-ho successfully took down the first noble centipede. But if you don't have the main character aura, you shouldn't try this at home. 36 stratagems running away is best. A system notification appeared. Noble Centipede Massacre. Noble centipedes killed 1 out of 30. But Sun-ho's expression was a bit strange. These centipedes are so easy to kill. They were supposed to be stronger than the regular ones, but now isn't the time to think about that. The easier the better. Sun-ho used the carcass to teach Yoon-hee a few things. Don't let their appearance fool you, they have brains. Don't think they're just bugs, or you'll pay the price. But if you cut off their tentacles, they become stupid. You should be careful with their venom glands. If you get bitten or stabbed, you'll endure immense pain. Only skills and seals can neutralize the toxin. If you get a heavy dose, the pain will be horrific, but don't worry, it will recover after a few days. After that, Sun-ho approached and kicked the centipede's shell a few times. Once he confirmed the hardness had nearly disappeared after death, he decided to harvest its byproducts. Sun-ho precisely located the gland on the centipede's body, and then decisively ripped the shell off. He jammed his hand straight inside and rummaged for something. Yoon-hee, witnessing this for the first time, was scared out of her wits. After searching for a moment, Sun-ho pulled out a large, sparkling stone. It was a magic stone. Right now it was useless, but soon it would be worth more than gold. After finishing, the two continued to conquer the dungeon. They didn't know that danger was looming. It wasn't a coincidence that the first noble centipede was so easy to kill. A system notification appeared. Gaia's will has been activated. Enemies are tracking you. Going deeper into the dungeon, Sun-ho encountered more noble centipedes, but thanks to his experience and his skills and superior stats, it wasn't hard for Sun-ho to wipe them all out. He had already taken down a dozen of these noble centipedes. The injuries he received from them didn't really affect his combat power. As he got closer to Grade E, Sun-ho's consciousness gradually returned. Grade A hunters had gained countless experience through their own survival skills. Currently, Sun-ho was even stronger than the system's evaluation. Realizing this, Sun-ho was confident that he could clear this dungeon in less than a month. He would speed up his progress. However, there were some things he hadn't accounted for. Over 100 noble rank centipedes had attacked. It had been 5 days since Sun-ho was struck by the centipede's venom. He sat amidst countless monster carcasses, his mind drifting in and out of consciousness.